Hey everyone, I'm Megyn Kelly. Welcome to the Megyn Kelly Show. Oh, we have an interesting debate for you coming just a bit later about free speech, big tech, and censorship in America. Just how censorious do you want big tech to be? Maybe you're thinking, I want them to be less censorious. I'm the one whose viewpoints always get censored, and therefore I'm against protecting big tech when it comes to their censoring pen with the big eraser. It's more complicated than that, because if we take away the things that protect them, who's going to pay? Big tech or us, right? It's actually a really interesting debate. We're going to get into it in just a bit. But we begin with the return of one of my favorite guests and quite possibly the smartest man I know. Western civilization is in a state of crisis. Perhaps you've noticed. The virtual and digital are replacing genuine experience, right? The metaverse, what the hell's that? How about just like the universe we're already in? Why do we need a new digital universe? Feelings too often are replacing facts. How we navigate all these issues in our society will determine no less than if we can save the Western world. Spencer Klavan is one of the people who can help do that. He could actually save the Western world all on his own if we would just do what he tells us. He is the host of the Young Heretics podcast and author of the new book out today, which I highly, highly recommend to you, How to Save the West, Ancient Wisdom for 5 Modern Crises. Look, you did the tough thing during COVID. You paid your people and you pulled your business through the pandemic. And now doing the tough thing could qualify you for up to $26,000 per employee at covidtaxrelief.org. Nobody knows about this thing and you need to. Government funds are available right now. They've already been allotted. It's not like new money to reward companies with 2 or more employees who stayed open during COVID. It's not a loan. You don't have to pay it back. The program's complicated, naturally, but nobody knows more about it than the CPAs and tax experts at covidtaxrelief.org. You pay nothing upfront. They do all the work, and then they share a percentage of the cash they get for you. Businesses of all types, including nonprofits and churches, can qualify, including those who took PPP loans, even if you had increases in sales. You did the tough thing for your employees during COVID. Let covidtaxrelief.org help you now get up to $26,000 per employee. covidtaxrelief.org. 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 Check it out. Spencer, welcome back. Great to have you.
Oh, Megyn, it's so great to be here. And I'm going to tattoo Megyn Kelly says I'm the smartest man she knows onto my forehead. That's going to be my new
I don't throw that out there loosely. I know a lot of smart people. I've interviewed a lot of smart people. Your brain is special.
Oh, thank you. It's so lovely to be back with you.
And you come by it honestly because your dad is Andrew Klavan, who we also love. Sorry to mention your daddy every time you come on, but people know the last name and we're all such fans.
I'm proud to be associated with him despite my constant protestations that I'm not related to him. I actually am very proud to call him my dad. So more than happy to hear you mention his name. All
right. So let's set it up. Because what I love about this book is we're all going through these feelings of like, what's happening? Wait a minute. What happened to truth? What happened to God? What's going on with this gender craze? What's going on in our society? You can feel something very different from the way we used to be. And this book diagnoses why that's happening. Yes, it is happening. Why it's happening. What are the crises we're in the midst of? And then takes a look back at history, ancient history, to reassure us, I think, that none of this is new. We've been through virtually all of this before, and there are really great minds to give us some wisdom into how to navigate what's likely to come next, what's winnable, what's not. And you, as a classics expert, know all of that stuff. You've read all of that stuff, and you're living the modern day crises with us all. So you've sort of been able to mend history with modern day problems to give us some insight and some wisdom. So let's start with the crisis as you see it. Why does the West need saving? What are we going through?
Well, I think you really put your finger on it when you described that feeling like everything we're up against is kind of new and confusing. This sense we have that nobody has ever faced these problems before because our technology is totally new and the digital revolution has just reshaped the way we look at ourselves and see the world. And on one level, of course, it's true. The internet did not exist in ancient Greece. I am reliably informed. And yet, at the same time, the problems that we're being faced with by this new technology, questions like what is a human being and what is our place in the universe? And you mentioned the question of God. Those are actually fundamental eternal questions. And what that means is that they've been around for as long as human beings have been around. And there have been deep thinkers throughout the centuries in this Western tradition that we're all inheritors of, who have raised some really beautiful answers to these questions that can help us see our way forward. And what that means is we're not alone. I think when people tell you, oh, it's a brave new world and all the old books are primitive and superstitious, what they're really trying to do is deprive you of the community of the past. And I grew up, as you know, Megyn, in a house filled with books, old books that I would pull down off the shelf. And soon I realized that being surrounded with books meant being surrounded by friends. And so I wrote this book, How to Save the West, because I wanted people to have access to some of that stuff, have ownership over this wisdom that comes down to us from Athens and Jerusalem, so that we can answer some of these questions that are being raised, these 5 questions. Is there absolute truth? What do I do with my body? Does the world have meaning? Is there a God? And what's going to happen to America? Those are questions that we can answer or help to answer using the wisdom that comes down from the past, and not just using whatever the CDC or the WEF tells us today and tomorrow.
It's funny because during the Trump administration, Kellyanne Conway infamously said alternative facts. These are alternative facts. And people started to question whether we really are in this post-truth world where one side has its facts and the other side has its alternative facts. And that's only continued. She described it on this show as sort of a flub. It's just she was stepping on her own words and she wasn't really trying to create that narrative. But since then, it's become even worse. I mean, COVID is a great example of how, you could take the same issue and find 2 different experts with diametrically opposed views. And depending on which one is the leftist view versus the more heterodox view, that'll dictate how it's covered in the mainstream media. So people really are in a place of rejecting what we used to see as truth, what appears on the nightly news, what appears in the paper, what your trusted politicians tell you. That's gone. And a lot of us feel untethered now in trying to figure out truth. So that's one of the crises we're facing, is the reality crisis, which is related to truth. So how do you analyze that?
Yeah, well, I mentioned that moment with Conway in the book. And what's so funny about that is all of a sudden, when Bad Orange Man came along, it was like, we have a crisis of truth in the news and we're having a post-truth politics. And it's like, I am old enough to remember when Bill Clinton said it depends on what the meaning of the word is. Like Donald Trump's team did not invent this problem. And
how about if you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor?
There's a great example, sure. And there were the fake but accurate memos about George Bush, which Dan Rather put forward. And as you've said, it's only gotten worse, and it's particularly gotten worse because of what you were mentioning earlier, the tech and the fights over censorship that we're having. One of the reasons I think we're having these fights where people want to shut down free speech is because they believe there's this idea that if you can stop people from saying something, it'll stop being true. And if you can take control of the narrative, you can decide which COVID facts get spread and which don't, then you will actually have created reality, like as if it were just some kind of metaverse that we're all living in. And, an idea that has come up since I wrote the book is the idea of malinformation, not just disinformation or misinformation, but malinformation is where you're saying true facts, but you're using them wrong, right? It's bad to use those facts in those ways to make that point. And so we really are, when it gets down to it, we're in a crisis, which I call the reality crisis. Is there anything which is true or false, whether or not you're allowed to say it? Even if all the censors try to shut you up, is it still true that 1 + 1 is 2? And what I show in the book is that this is actually the crisis with which Greek philosophy kind of begins. It's the origin story of Western philosophy in some sense, that in Athens, the great democracy, you have this crisis where people are arguing that whatever you can get voted in, whatever you can argue for and present before the assembly, that's what goes. And so the justice is just the interests of the stronger. The strong do what they can, while the weak suffer what they must. And what I'm arguing in this book is that, in fact, if you want to take that pill, you're going to go all the way. It's not going to be a happy, blissful, metaverse kind of universe beyond your world. It's actually going to be a war of all against all. It's going to be power politics, because if there's no such thing as absolute truth, all you're left with is strength, and strength amounts essentially to the threat of violence. And I think that a lot of people, as they start to lose their grip on, what the quote unquote official narrative is, they feel like there's no way of discovering truth. But the fact is that we actually have an apparatus for searching out the truth. It's called reason. The Greeks called it logos. And we can recover ownership over our own reason and confidence, which is what a lot of people are beginning to do as they start to reject the experts, which I think is the right move. I think we should move further in that direction as we form our own opinions and open the discourse as much as we can to seeking the absolute truth, which is the beauty and the goodness with which philosophy begins.
How does the rejection of God, of religion, of any sort of higher power factor into this?
Right. Well, it's difficult, I think, when you start talking about this, especially in an American context, you start to feel like you're just forcing your religion down people's throats, right? The people will say, don't force your God on me. We have separation of church and state. And one of the things I say in the book is, I'm not trying to convert everybody to my church. It would be great if everybody went to my church. I would love that. But that's really not the problem that we're up against. The real problem that we're up against is we all actually kind of know that some things are true and some things are false. And it's not just like physical facts that are true and false, like this table is sitting here in front of me right now. There's also moral truths that are true and false. It's wrong to take innocent life without cause, for instance. These moral truths also have a kind of absolute reality that we can't just wish away. And spiritual truths are part of that universe, the universe beyond, just our flesh. And if we want to believe in that, which we all have to in order to form a functioning society, we do have to believe. We don't have to subscribe to, this or that faith tomorrow or believe the Nicene Creed right now, but we do have to admit that everybody acts as if there is such a thing as a highest truth and a highest good. Bob Dylan, the great poet and prophet, says you got to serve somebody. And the Bible's version of this is that the fool hath said in his heart, there is no God. We have this idea that line just means like, oh, atheists are dumb or something. But that's actually, I don't think that's what the Psalms are saying. When you say the fool has said in his heart, there is no God, what it means is, when you tell yourself you're not worshiping, when you tell yourself there's no higher power, you're actually fooling yourself. You're making yourself into a fool because you're deceiving yourself. Everybody operates as if there's a highest good behind everything he or she does. And if you pretend that's not true, you just end up worshiping without knowing it, which is what we saw, in the summer of 2020 when people were kneeling before these Black Lives Matter protesters, begging for forgiveness and absolution, or when they were, referring to the science, capital S, as a kind of, occult authority that could tell them what to do. And Dr. Fauci represents it. He is his priest. Amen. This is kind of how people are starting to behave. And I think the real thing we need is not so much a conversion as a surrender, to realize that what we are doing already implies a kind of worship, and we should be self-aware about that, and we should look to the great traditions of Scripture and the church to help us understand what is worthy of worship. What's the highest good that we could seek that would actually ennoble us rather than making us slaves? Let's start there.
One of the aggravating things about that truth you just told us is if we could actually get those beliefs recognized as a religion, then we could stop them from permeating the public square and being pushed on us by government, which isn't allowed to favor one religion over another. And yet we can't. It hasn't been recognized, wokeism, as a religion, and therefore it can be pernicious in how it gets pushed on us in the schools, in our jobs, at the corporate or at the government level, as we're seeing now with the Biden administration. But you write in the book the following. In the 21st century, political demands often boil down to the assertion that the speaker's point of view or identity should be taken as an absolute authority. The various slogans we chant show this. Believe women, that's my truth. Elevate Black voices. And your point is that without God, again, quoting, without some shared, stable, objective basis for understanding what is true, moral, and real, we are left only with competing demands for power and competing attempts to control the facts. This is a very smart way of talking about this void. The more we remove God and the principles that we associate with God and with a higher power, the more we create a vacuum that gets filled with utter banalities. That's to be charitable. Really, the truth is, what we fill it with is downright dangerous.
Well, sure. That's absolutely right. And I think that, the kind of religious nature of all of these belief systems can really be seen when you start to ask, well, what's the basis for believing, for instance, that, a man can become a woman simply by saying so, or, that men can get pregnant, all these kind of abstract ideas that we use to divide sex and gender and to suggest that they're both kind of infinitely malleable. Well, it's not like, science has discovered that this is true. You get a kind of pseudo-scientific language around it. They've claimed to have proven this in some objective way. But in fact, since notions like gender, which is kind of a purely spiritual concept, those notions don't actually exist anywhere on like a brain scan. They are ideas about the soul. They're really actually closely tied to some very ancient notions like the Neoplatonic idea that there's our body, and that's just like flesh, or it's a plaything, or it's a doll to be molded. And then there is the soul, which kind of lives in this perfect sphere. I mean, nowadays we talk as if it lives kind of online or in the cloud, but that division between body and soul, which is very close to the heart of the sort of trans extremist movement, the post-gender, third-wave feminism, whatever you want to call it. You read like Judith Butler's Gender Trouble, where she really kind of goes into this stuff. And it's totally Neoplatonic and Cartesian. It's like I'm dividing my body from my soul. My soul is the true me, and everything else, it's like, well, maybe I get surgery today, maybe I reconstruct my body tomorrow, or I, put horns on my head or whatever, because my body is just a kind of appendage or a toy that I'm playing with. Now, whatever else that is, it's definitely an article of faith, right? It's definitely a profession of something that some spiritual idea that you believe, rather than, some scientific objective fact that everybody has to accept tomorrow, or else you're a bigot and you're just ignorant and wrong, right? These are spiritual claims, and one way of measuring a spiritual claim is to see what kind of behavior it produces and what kind of results it produces for people. And that's where the danger that you're talking about comes in, because you ask, how's it working out for you to be perpetrating these terrible invasive surgeries on kids and whatever, and the answer is it's making us sicker and more depressed, and tearing apart the fabric of our social life and our society, and since it's simply an article of faith that this is going to do anything good for us, I don't think it's working out that well. I think it's pretty obvious that the older idea, which is that your body is the language for your soul, that we are in some sense embodied souls, would be a truer religion that we could actually adopt in place of this kind of neo-Gnostic trans extremism.
So how do we look at, some of the ancient philosophers and get an answer to this reality crisis? I know the book mentions Socrates, always some wisdom there. Like, is that just a cautionary tale? Is that a cautionary tale, or is that an answer?
I mean, it can definitely start to look like a cautionary tale, especially when you remember they made him kill himself, right? I mean, it's not like this stuff is guaranteed to turn out right or to turn out well. But there's an interesting thing that you see when you start to read these texts, and I point this out in the book, that it's often the case that the thing which will get you hounded out of town today is the seed that's going to grow into the tree of tomorrow's civilization. And that's what happened with Socrates. Now, nobody would wish Socrates' fate on anybody, and I don't think that you're, destined to be attacked by an angry mob if you stand up for these realities that we're talking about here. But I do think that we should recognize, that the world being what it is, the world being fallen, you're always going to be facing some opposition when you're seeking the true, the good, and the beautiful. Those things are, to say the least, they're inconvenient to the powers that be. And without developing a persecution complex, we should be realists about knowing that, it's going to be tough out there. But I always think about this moment in Lord of the Rings, of all places, which where Frodo says, "I wish the ring had never come to me." Gandalf, the wise wizard, says, "So do all who live to see such times, but that is not for them to decide. All we can do is decide what to do with the time that's given us." And I think that's the position that, Socrates was in. It's the position, for instance, that Marcus Cicero was in, another thinker I write about in the book, who lived at the very end of the Roman Republic. And, his ideas didn't win the day, but they carried forward into the future until at last, they helped to build this country. When we're talking about the reality crisis, we're talking about something that these thinkers have been wrestling with again and again. I also mentioned Aristotle in the book. He's an important figure to turn to. But I think really the biggest question when it comes to despair, right, is, are we just looking at cautionary tales here? I think what we're really trying to do is to understand ourselves as inheritors of a tradition that will outlast us. Because even if things fall apart, and I'm not saying they're going to, I'm not a determinist about this, but even if things fall apart, you want to have been preserving the flame that future generations will be able to pick up. That effort is never wasted, which is one of the things you learn from studying history in the long view.
Well, at least we're going to go down swinging. You write about Plato's cave. And this is interesting because it's a story that helps us understand the importance of distrusting elites, which is something you mentioned just a couple minutes ago. Can you get into that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, this is kind of the original virtual reality dystopia, is Plato's cave, and we're all already living in it, is sort of the idea. Plato famously in the Republic, Book 7, he talks about this cave where all of humanity is shackled and all they can see is shadows on a wall. There's a fire and there are kind of puppet masters that manipulate the shadows. So people think that's reality. But the truth is that actually outside the cave, the sun is shining, and that's the true light, which is the beautiful and the good, which we only dimly and at a distance see reflected in the sort of day-to-day experience that we might have. And I think one of the things that is so powerful about that image is that it gives you a third-person outsider's view. It lets you see that even though the people in the cave think they're perceiving reality, they're actually at the whim of the powerful, people who have just one more degree of information and power than they do. And as we start to play around with the virtual reality idea, as it becomes more and more possible to think about ourselves, quote unquote, in the metaverse, or, uploading our consciousness into some kind of virtual reality cloud, suddenly this idea, which has been the subject of dystopian horror for centuries, becomes like a sales pitch. It becomes, oh, this is something we should all like and want to do. And I think if we look back to Plato's cave, and if we even look back to, stories after that, which have kind of followed on, like, The Matrix or Wall-E or these other kind of Snow Crash, these sort of dystopian fiction stories that we've written, they show us our intuition of something which is really true, which is that if you give up the ability to determine true and false, if you give it over, you're always giving it over to somebody. And that person has interests of his own, which might or might not be entirely salutary. So when somebody comes and says to you, digital tech has made it so there's no need for true and false anymore. You can just have everything you want if you will simply strap on these goggles and live in a virtual reality. The alarm that I'm sounding in this book, and that I think Plato is sounding, and all of these, sort of fiction writers after him, is, that's always a bum deal, because the person that you're handing over your data to, handing over your mind to, handing control over to, has his own agenda. And that's the elites that you're talking about. As people begin to discover that elites are actually not infallible, and in fact they have many of the same kind of sins and temptations that just you and I have, I think it's really healthy and salutary that we're realizing, actually these guys are not gods. They're not beyond the problems that mankind has faced for generations, and maybe we should think twice before we hand over our lives to them.
I'm thinking about this exchange I had. I've mentioned this to the audience before. At the beginning of COVID, when Trump had that very weird, disjointed news conference where he was like, "I'm shutting down all travel," and then they're like,
Oh,
"No, he's
yeah.
not shutting down all travel." Like he had like 5 things he had to correct as soon as the press conference was over. I
Right.
remember tweeting out something to the effect of, I wish I knew who to trust. I recognize I cannot trust what he is saying, but I also recognize I cannot trust what the media is saying about him and about this virus either, because they have an
Mm.
agenda prior to an election and just getting him out and saying whatever he says is wrong. And it was a great frustration that I recognized early on in COVID, and many people shared. And I love Ann Curry, by the way. She's such a sweet person, and think the world of her. But at the time, she tweeted sort of at me, um,
Mm.
trust the WHO, the CDC, Anthony Fauci. And this was early enough
Right.
in the pandemic. We weren't yet where we are on them. You know what I mean? Like most of us
Right.
sort of, you had to be lied to repeatedly before the light bulb went off with these organizations. But I remember being like, And to your point, like, think of that. It's the same kind of thing. There's this group that you're supposed to trust. They're the elites. And
Right.
supposedly they had a little bit more information than we had in the cave. And yet they
Right.
didn't. And a healthy distrust was very much warranted. And now, most of our view of these people and these groups has completely changed, at least for most people on the right and in the center of the country.
That's right. And it's been transformative. It's been transformative for me, that's for sure. I mean, would have been much more sympathetic to somebody saying trust the WHO before the pandemic than I would be now. And it's because, the human beings, the fallible human beings who make up those institutions have betrayed our trust. And that's not, that's something that has happened in the past. Machiavelli says that when the elites betray the trust of the people, they do 2 kinds of damage. They damage their own credibility, but they also damage the credibility of the regime, of the country or the nation that they are a part of. And that's why it's so evil, is because we don't just lose our faith in this or that governing body, we also lose our faith in the whole kind of structure of power that we're supposed to be kind of believing in and participating in. And this is, I think, really importantly, why our founding fathers, who deserve, as far as I am concerned, to be counted among the great thinkers of the Western tradition. They established a principle that actually, the nation is sovereign among nations and the individual is sovereign, within his own personal life and personal decisions. And the reason for that is it's not like there's no such thing as knowledge, right? It's not like there's no such thing as people who know stuff that we don't know and can give us information we don't have. It's that politics and the decision about what to do is actually an ethical decision. We're actually making moral choices, not just about how infectious is this disease or, what's the, number of molecules that are operative before you get infected, whatever, but actually about what we should and should not do. And in those questions of ethics, questions of politics, it's not the same thing as a math problem. It's not something that you can trust a scientist to go away and run the model and do the calculation and tell you, oh, climate change is this deadly. And so unfortunately we have to, we must pass this law. No, that is not the idea this country was founded on. We believe that when it comes to ethical decisions, it's not a math problem, it's a soul problem. And we together as the people elect representatives who make these choices for us. And we don't just outsource, our ethical or moral responsibility to these absolute bodies of total power and control. Now, that whole idea was called into question by the capital P progressives, right? There was this notion that history had moved beyond our system and actually the Constitution was kind of outdated. And, what we really just need to do is outsource all of this to governing bureaucracies. It's the birth of the modern administrative state, and this whole notion, which is now kind of deep seated among, one portion of our polity, it's got to go if we want to recover the American idea, which is that, yes, there are people who know things. Yes, there are scientists. Indeed, there are even legitimate experts out there. But what they aren't is kings, and they are not, they're not designed by God to rule over us. We are designed to rule over us. And the last analysis, we get to make the decisions.
It's So stimulating listening to you. I have to tell you, it's like great for my brain. I love it all. But I'm thinking about right now, just we've never had a stronger executive in this country, and it was never meant to be. You know, we were fleeing a king. We didn't want that. The founders, who were brilliant, didn't want that at all. They wanted the presidency to be the smallest branch, the least powerful. And yes, the administrative state has grown beyond anything they ever envisioned, but even just the powers that we cede. You know, look at Joe Biden just over the past, whatever year, trying to extend the rent abatement program and just all these things that he acknowledged would be struck down by the courts, but he did it anyway because he thought it would help him politically. Not to mention the student loan nonsense that he's pulling that he knows will not be upheld. Why is he doing that? Because he's acting like a king, right? Congress was meant to rein in the excessive president, the excessive executive branch, and they won't. And now I look at Congress, who were supposed to be a bunch of regular folks who decided to serve their country and bring their farmer ideals into the office and sort of keep a realistic pulse, finger on the pulse of the nation. Now they're a bunch of morons. They're a bunch of stupid morons who just want attention for themselves and they're congressional Kardashians. Is it any wonder that our politicians feel like they've completely failed us and don't relate to us at all?
And Congress has given over so much of the power that now exists in these bureaucracies and in the executive branch. You're absolutely right. And this is an area where it is really easy to get into a despair cycle real quick because you start looking at the structural
spiraling.
So here we are. We're in the spiral at this moment. Let me see if I can grab a handhold out of here. In the book, what I describe is the sort of history of political philosophy that got us up to the place where the founders were able to say, you know what, let's have a republic, right? There's this long tradition of thinking about what's called anacyclosis, the cycle of regimes. And the basic idea is,
let me just say, this is like the most interesting part of the book to me. Everybody needs to pay attention to this. This is actually really important. Go ahead.
Okay, cool. Yeah. No, I'm glad you like it because I find this stuff endlessly fascinating. So let's go into it. So there's three kinds of basic government of politike in the Greek is the idea of how do you run your society? How does your civilization function? What are the rules? And who gets to make these decisions, right? In the Greek idea of the polis, which is the city state, is kind of the petri dish for thinking about this sort of stuff. And Aristotle, who's one of the great thinkers on this topic in his Politics, he says there's three ways that you can organize this. There's three ways that you can arrange the system. Fundamentally, one is monarchy, one person rules, right? Another is aristocracy. A few people rule and they're the best people. All the best people, as Trump might say, are in charge in aristocracy. Then you have what we would now call democracy, although Aristotle uses slightly different languages, but rule by the many who collectively make decisions. And Aristotle, crucially, this is so important for us to remember because it relates to what you were saying about the breakdown of our system. There is no system that you can construct that will not suffer decay because human beings are a mess. And over time, we fall victim to our peccadillos and our flaws and all of these sorts of things. And he says the thing that makes the difference. Yes, hubris is classic. You're right. That's the classical example. Pride, overweening pride. And the thing that makes the difference, and this is also crucial, Aristotle says, between the virtuous version of a government and the evil version of government has to do with love. It has to do with what the point is of doing politics together at all. If the rulers are ruling for the benefit of the ruled, out of love for their citizenry, then you have a good state. If the king loves his people and makes decisions with their interests in mind, he's a good king. Let's say his son comes along now and he's a spoiled brat. And he decides actually that he's going to rule for his own benefit. He's going to tax the people heavily so that he can have a more beautiful palace, let's say, or he's going to go to war out of pure spite with somebody, not because he needs to protect the nation. That's what we call a tyrant. And that's the decayed version of monarchy. Now, if you have a monarchy, which is sort of the natural way of living, that somebody rises up like a strong man or something to run society, decays into a tyranny, it's possible that you'll get an aristocratic uprising. The nobles will say, I've had enough of this taxation. I'm going to take over. So the aristocrats are going to be in charge. The decayed version of this, when they start dealing for their own benefit, for their own self-love, that's called an oligarchy. We're very familiar with this kind of decay. It's when the elite become corrupt and they rule for themselves and their cronies. when that happens, it's very possible you get a democratic uprising. The people take control. They take back that power of the system. If the democratic regime decays, then it becomes one of my favorite classical words we've totally lost, an ochlocracy, which is the rule by the ochlos, or the mob. It's mob rule. And in mob rule, of course, it's very easy for a strong man to come in and take over. And the cycle of regimes begins again. So you get this kind of theory of history that it just goes over and over again, and the whole cycle begins anew. The whole point of a republic, which is what our system is to create a perpetual motion machine. Take all these different forms of government, these different kinds of power, and you combine them together and you balance them against one another. That's checks and balances, right? And so now you have these different kinds of parts of the government, like an executive branch that has kind of, unitary power, but then also, everybody's accountable to the people. So you have that democratic power, but you also have a legislative elite that's supposed to sort of serve as the aristocratic branch, and they work together, play off against one another. How is it possible that this beautifully designed system has fallen apart into the decay that you described earlier on, right? The answer, Machiavelli tells us, and Plato kind of hints at this as well, is class warfare. Once you get to a point where the different parts of the society, the aristocratic parts, the popular parts, the populists and the elites, don't think of themselves as fellow citizens, but think of themselves as members of a tribe. You're a white person, so you're inherently racist. You're a man, so you're inherently sexist. You're straight, so you're inherently homophobic, right? Once you get people thinking that way, you have poisoned the mechanism of the republic, and you have destroyed, going back to that very crucial thing that Aristotle talks about, you've destroyed civic love. It's love and friendship and neighborliness that makes a civilization what it is. These sort of small daily acts of marrying and being given in marriage, of forming rituals together, going to ball games together. These things sound so simple, but they are the stuff that the community is made out of. And this finally is the foothold that I think we can get out of our despair cycle, because we're not going to rewrite the system so that it all gets, fixed overnight. But what we can do, and what in some places we already are doing, is reinvest in that philia, that local love and neighborly friendship that makes a civilization what it is. You're starting to see this in states, I think, like Florida, out here in Tennessee, in Nashville. I see it happening every day. These local societies, associations that, go to the school board and fight for what they, believe in, and talk it out with their neighbors, figure out how we're going to rule ourselves. It's bottom up, not top down. And I think that's the way to kind of reclaim some ownership and start to move in the direction of fixing the problems that ail the country. Of course, it's going to take many years. And of course, there's still national elections to worry about and all of that. But unless we get a sense that actually we have ownership over our communities, we won't even get started. It's philia, political love, civic friendship that really needs recovering in this hour.
Right. We have to talk about that more. I want to talk more about how we can make that happen if we don't feel like it's happening in our community. But I will say, just listening to you, I was reminded of just the other night, I was watching the Super Bowl with my kids. And of course, we had to have the Black national anthem before we had the actual national anthem, which in this context is divisive. It is. There's, the kids are sitting there like, what is that? There's a special anthem just for Black people and not for the white people. It's like, I don't, how are you supposed to explain this, right? So it's like, yes, it is divisive. Sure. It is divisive. Not in this context, it's divisive.
Absolutely.
And then they played, I'll just finish it, but then they played the national anthem, the actual national anthem. And of course, I made my kids, even sitting in my kitchen, stand up and put your hand on your heart. And they did it. And why did I need to do that? Nobody could see us. Didn't so count for anything. It counted because of the principles you're talking about right now, because I bet there were kids and adults all over the country doing the same thing. Love of country, love of the ideals that this country was built upon and stands for still, and that many of us are still trying to live by. Like, that's what we salute. That's what's important. Listen to the words of that song. Listen to the principles that have been handed down, not dividing us based on race. There's something so much bigger that ties us all together. We need to get back to that. Go ahead.
Oh, no, amen. I'm glad that you finished there, because I had a sort of similar experience recently where I think it was in Orange County. Somebody was saying, I can't believe that they voted to take down the pride flag outside of this public building. And it's just a sign of hatred and more of the right-wing campaign to yada, yada, yada. You know how this stuff goes. And you know, they always make it out as if, if you're in favor of taking the pride flag down, you're a bigot. And they hold people emotional hostage because, as I well know, people who love whatever, who have a gay person in their life that they love, they feel like, if I don't go along with this political movement, with this other flag outside of my public buildings, then, I'm betraying my family. I'm betraying my loved one, and I'm hateful. And I'm sorry, but my flag is the American flag. And the flag that flies outside my public building should be the American flag. And I will not be used as a prop in somebody else's kind of neo-Marxist campaign. They do this in a million different ways. They just find the thing that you care about. Oh, you're bad because you hate women if you think that men can't magically become women, or you're bad, right, because you don't want to sing the Black national anthem before before the Super Bowl. The other one that really got to me was the pandemic of the unvaccinated, which President Biden said at one point. It's like, okay, so there's a whole portion of the population that is tantamount to a disease. That's really what our political rhetoric is going to be. And this is the kind of hope and change and transformation and the return to normalcy. I'm sorry, but first and foremost, before anything else, when it comes to politics, I am an American. If we can't say that, then we're in trouble. But I think there's a lot of people out there that are ready to say that if we have courage and sort of lead in that regard.
I saw you had a great comment on in connection with that flag controversy. He was saying, quoting Inez Fletcher of the Claremont Institute, saying she must surely be right that no actual homosexual can possibly have been involved in the design of something so grotesquely tacky as the LGBTQ flag.
These days, every day now, they put some new color on it. It's like you can't even get a gay person to hang drapes that don't match the carpet. And you're trying to convince me that there's some, coalition of like all the gay people out there are building it. I don't buy it for a second. I think it's the Borg flag. I think it's like the sort of weird amalgamation of everything that they want to use to destroy the country.
I had never considered that before, but it is absolutely true. I'll never look at the flag the same again. Spencer, thank you. Stand by. Much, much more on the opposite side of this break with Spencer Klavan. If you're like me, you are growing more and more concerned about the future. The market's all over the place and inflation is at its highest level in 40 years. Interest rates continue to skyrocket, market experts predicting a recession still, and using scary terms like economic hurricane. If you would like to protect your future, consider the precious metal dealer American Hartford Gold. They can show you how to protect your savings and retirement accounts by diversifying your portfolio with physical gold and silver. All it takes to get started is a super short phone call, and they will have physical gold and silver delivered right to your door, or even easier, inside your IRA or 401k. And they keep it simple. They are the highest rated firm in the country with an A+ rating from the Better Business Bureau and thousands of satisfied clients. And as an exclusive offer for our fans, if you call them right now, they're going to give you up to $1,500 of free silver. How about that? $1,500 of free silver and a free safe on qualifying orders. So don't wait. Call now. Call 866-518-2955. 866-518-2955. Or text MEGYN to 65532. Again, that's 866-518-2955, or text my name, Megyn, to 65532. Spencer Klavan is my guest today. He's the author of the new must-read book, How to Save the West, which is out today. I'm telling you, I don't say this about every book. You must buy this. It is short. He actually makes it an easy read, even for those of us who are dummies when it comes to classics. Another thing I love about his podcast. Buy the book. You won't be sorry. How to Save the West. I blurbed it for a reason, not just because Spencer's a friend, but I truly want everybody to read this. And people write in, Spencer, all the time saying, is there anything I can read to help me make sense of the craziness happening in our world right now? And I've been recommending this, so I'm glad it's finally out.
Fantastic.
I had the pleasure of the advanced read, and now everybody gets to have it. All right. I want to follow up on the cycle. So monarchy into aristocracy / oligarchy into democracy into mob rule. And then does it go again back to monarchy? And where are we in the cycle? Where is America right now? Obviously, we're technically a republic, but I would imagine we're in the democracy into mob rule phase. But is monarchy coming our way if this all fails? What's happening next?
Well, it's really interesting. The way I think about this theory of the cycle of regimes is It's not a prescription, and it's not a prediction of what's going to happen tomorrow. It's like a template, and once you have it in your mind, you can see pieces of it playing out, sort of like snatches from a familiar tune. Like when, for instance, the barons rise up against King John because of his oppressive taxation. You start to see that force of the aristocratic rebellion against a tyrannical king, and that idea is really what we're looking at, is dynamics that are always at play. They're eternal because they're part of human nature, so they never go away, and we can use them to understand each new thing that comes up. So what I say in the book is, what I think we're in is kind of an interesting position, where at home we're sort of looking like a decaying republic. And when republics decay, they turn into oligarchies. They get seized by an elite, and you start to get that war between the different classes, the social classes. And by the way, a lot of this was done on purpose by the New Left, by Marxists, who figured out that there wasn't going to be an economic revolution in America. So the way to bring about revolution here was to foment different kinds of classes, to make them hate one another. And this is where you get ideas like white privilege. People like Noel Ignatieff and some of his colleagues talking about white skin privilege. That's where this stuff comes from, and it's how we decay from a republic at home into this kind of oligarchic, weird court state. But overseas, we have this similarly strange thing going on where we're kind of almost an empire, right? We've extended our power across the world so enormously, and we've done so kind of informally in all of these ways, through NGOs and with all of these, many different ways that we exert influence over other nations. Sometimes the influence is good, sometimes it's not so good, but the truth is that we have this kind of global network of influence that lands us in all sorts of trouble and complications. But I think the real issue is not so much that those networks are falling apart, but that they're falling apart because we are falling apart at home. And as I said, the way we're falling apart is that class warfare. Machiavelli, who's somebody that not everybody will be familiar with as the great theorist of republics. They think of him as the kind of realpolitik scheming author of The Prince. But he has a book, The Discourses on Livy. It's a really beautiful examination of the great Roman historian Livy, who told the story of the transition from republic from monarchy into republic among the Romans. And Machiavelli has this amazing passage where he sits around and he basically tries to figure out whether the elites or the people are worse. Like, which one is it the populists or the elites that are worse? And it's a very relevant passage for our times, because we, of course, we've been talking here on the show about how terrible our elites are and our experts, and I believe all of that stuff. But I also see how people could say, yeah, but the populists can be just as bad, right? They could be, what about January 6th? What about these, kind of excesses of populism that we flirted with and all of this? And what Machiavelli ultimately concludes is that although both of these things are a danger, elite decay, elite corruption is the most dangerous thing, because it destroys faith in the system. It betrays the trust, not just of the people in the elites, but of the people in the country that elevated those people to positions of power. And so you start to get that despair cycle again. It's like, how do we, even operate in this country when the systems that elevate people into positions of power are so broken? And so there's a couple ways out of that, not all of them very pretty. And as I say in the book, we do not want to head into another civil war, into another form of secession. These are all things that I, at least, very deep, fervently pray will not come to pass. And so we ought to think about what's the remedy to elite capture that doesn't involve all those terrible outcomes. And the one that I pull out of these classical texts is that investment in the local community. When this country was founded, there was a big debate going on about whether you could even do a republic over such a large, extended space. Many of the European theorists, especially the Baron de Montesquieu in France, had this idea that republics, it's kind of been tried. Rome did it pretty well, but then they got too big, and that's when you start to see all these problems. It kind of fell apart. And our founding fathers, especially James Madison, had this argument that actually a big country is an advantage for a republic because there's room to breathe. He said, if you extend the sphere of your country, you're going to end up with all these little pockets of community where people can do things in ways that maybe they don't approve of back in Washington. Maybe you get like little Amish communities, or you get places like Florida where, they're not going to lock down for the COVID mandates, or at least, they're going to be a lot less intense about it. And I think even though that system has been attacked a lot, it remains our best hope, and it remains where I see the most exciting action going on, because it's in those communities and it's in those local neighborhoods and then up to the state level that the problems become human-sized, and they become at a level where people can talk to one another, they can see each other face to face. We don't reduce one another into these kind of abstract concepts like you're a blue-haired lib and I'm a fascist Republican or whatever. We can actually talk at a human level about particular solutions to the particular problems that face us. And I think that's why you're seeing so much movement, say, on the school boards. You're seeing a lot of hope coming out of states like Florida where people are flocking to. They can't move there fast enough. It's because in those local communities, those little platoons, as Edmund Burke called them, you can actually establish philia. You can establish love, civic friendship. And if there's one thing I draw out of Aristotle in this book, it's that civilization building, for all that it's political, for all that it involves voting and fighting and whatever, at the bottom, civilization building is an act of love, and we've got to recover that. We can't be ashamed about that. We have to reimagine ourselves as neighbors and citizens in a community built on love.
I love everything you just said. I also think it's a good reminder that doing all of that is not an online activity. It does not happen on Twitter. It does happen in your actual neighborhood. I always say that all my friends in my Upper West Side neighborhood, who are still my best friends, they're all liberals. I love them.
Yeah.
I see how our love for each other can be the foundation for the renewal of our society. I couldn't care less what their politics are. I care about who they are as women. So it's just a reminder. It's not the metaverse. It's not Twitter. It's not Facebook. It's the people within 15 feet, the family, the neighborhood, the friends, where we cultivate the solutions on how to save the West. Read the book. Listen to Young Heretics, and aren't we also lucky to have Spencer Klavan available to us? Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, Megyn, I'm the lucky one. Thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure.
Oh, hope to see you soon. And up next, we have more goodness for you as we take a deep dive. It's going to be a fair and balanced debate on tech censorship. You've heard about Section 230. Maybe you don't know what it is. You're going to know, and you're going to know about the debate going underway right now. That's underway right now at the Supreme Court and beyond when it comes to big tech and free speech in America. Like many people, I am eating healthier these days, trying to. And that's why I love good olive oil. And by good, I mean fresh. Olive oil packs the most flavor and the healthiest nutrients when it's fresh from the farm. And that's the problem with supermarket olive oils. They're not fresh. They can sit on the shelf for months, growing stale and stale and still staler. This is why I like my olive oil direct from small award-winning farms, thanks to a guy named TJ Robinson. This really is a deal changer. Also known as the olive oil hunter. When I tasted TJ's farm fresh oils, I fell in love with their vibrant, grassy flavors. They're delicious on salads, veggies, pasta, fish, meat, you name it. As an introduction to his fresh pressed olive oil club, TJ's willing to send you a full-size bottle worth $39 of one of the world's finest artisanal olive oils for just $1 to help him cover shipping. Best of all, there's never a commitment to buy anything, and you can cancel your membership at any time. Get your free $39 bottle for just $1 in shipping and taste the difference freshness makes. Go to harvestfreshnow.com. Harvestfreshnow.com for a free bottle and pay just $1 in shipping. Harvestfreshnow.com. Are you concerned at all about censorship on tech platforms and free speech in America? Do you feel like you've been targeted? Do you feel like what you can see online has been targeted in a way that makes certain viewpoints unavailable to you? This affects everyone. But what is the right solution? It sounds kind of wonky, but the topic of Section 230 is important, and it's affecting your daily life whether you know it or not. And it's also being kicked around right now by the U.S. Supreme Court. Section 230 is a landmark U.S. law that shields social media companies from liability over content their users post. So if I go online on the YouTube comments section and I see something totally defamatory that's not true about somebody, I could get sued potentially, but YouTube can't. YouTube, they're not responsible to police my thoughts because they're not considered really like a publisher. The way, let's say, remember when Amber Heard got sued by Johnny Depp for defamation? She posted something in the Washington Post. It's more dicey when you're the newspaper than when you are a social media company. So like newspapers are held to a higher level. Social media companies are held to a lower level. Some people think that should change, and many people do not. All right, so now the Supreme Court's going to hear next week a case involving this and Google. And today we decided to get together two true experts on this issue who have vastly different opinions on these very important topics. We're going to have a good, respectful debate between Kate Tamarello, Executive Director of Engine, and Will Chamberlain, Senior Counsel for the Internet Accountability Project. Kate and Will, thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Great. Yeah, great to have you both. All right, so we're going to keep it simple so people who don't follow this anywhere nearly as closely as you guys do can follow it. So Kate, I'll start with you on briefly describe what is 230. We throw this term around, 230, should it be repealed? Should it not be repealed? Josh Hawley doesn't like it. Elizabeth Warren doesn't like it. Very weird bedfellows. But we know that the big tech platforms do like it, so we don't know what side to be on, right? Because it's like, wait, even conservatives are like, I don't want to side with Elizabeth Warren, but right? So they get confused. What is 230?
Yeah, so very simply, Section 230 is a 1996 law that essentially says whoever created the content should be legally responsible for it, not the platform that's hosting the content. And it often gets talked about in the context of social media. That makes a lot of sense. That's how most of us deal with the internet these days. But it's actually much broader than that. It applies to all internet platforms of all sizes, whether you're hosting social media posts like tweets or YouTube videos or Facebook posts or Instagram photos. But it's also things like reviews and ratings and photos and videos that you may be sharing at a smaller scale. So while the debate is often about kind of 230 and big tech, Engine is a nonprofit that works with startups and internet creators, and we're coming at it from the perspective of kind of the whole ecosystem and why the law and the liability shield really empowers users to speak and share content and information online.
Mm-hmm. So, Will, what most people say, and I've listened to Ben Shapiro, who of course has created and helps run the Daily Wire. He says, he's got his reservations, but he likes 230 because he's got the Daily Wire and he doesn't want to be held liable if somebody posts a comment on the Daily Wire that turns out not to be true. And then, that person gets sued for defamation, but now Ben's getting sued for defamation. What's Ben going to do? He's going to say, forget the comment section. Forget all of this. I'm not going to engage in this business if I am liable for what my users post. So most tech platforms, whether it's the Daily Wire, YouTube, Twitter, whatever, they like this shield because they don't really view themselves as in the business of like endorsing the content that their users post.
Right. And it's important to realize that the immunity in 230 is bigger than merely what our users post we're not responsible for. They also have an immunity protection for anything that these companies remove. And that's granted at the federal level. And so one of the big issues with 230 is that this federal grant of immunity for any type of removal of content that can be even otherwise objectionable, that ability to remove it has thwarted state laws at the state level that have been trying to protect individuals' right to speak freely online. So I think we actually might be in an agreement to the extent that, your average message forum or even social media platform shouldn't be held responsible for every single thing its users post. I mean, the scale is enormous. But at the same time, I don't think they should be given carte blanche to censor people based for political reasons.
All right, so let me stay with you for a minute. So you're going to explain to us why 230 is problematic in your view in its current form. And it sounds like you're focusing in on this ability to remove with impunity. Is this what they use to censor? And I realize it can be any viewpoint, but it's oftentimes the conservative one. Is this problematic because the right so often is the brunt of it?
Right. So there's two major sections of Section 230, two subsections. The first one is the one that you and Kate have been talking about, which is the one that says that just if you are the platform hosting the content, you are not the speaker of the content that is created by your users. And that is sort of there to insulate you from defamation liability. Like, just because somebody posts something defamatory on Facebook doesn't mean Facebook should be getting sued by the person who was lied about. But then there's the second part, subsection C2, and that part says that all of these tech companies and platforms basically are immunized from liability for removing any content that's lewd, lascivious, and a whole bunch of other negative words or otherwise objectionable. And so that does give them some protection to remove things like pornography, for example. But it's so broad that it means that the companies can say, no, we just want to kick you off the platform and remove your ability to speak. And not only do you have no recourse just generally, but if a state or even the federal government tries to create a law and give you some recourse against these companies doing that, it would be, if you were a state, it would be what's called preempted by the federal law. And so that.
Wait, so let me jump in. Let me jump in and ask you, give me a real life example of how this has been used in a way you find problematic.
Oh, for a good example is, so Florida passed a law. This was in the news, I think about a year ago. Florida passed a law that said that their citizens shouldn't be censored on social media for no good reason, and that if they are being censored for political reasons, they should have the right to. I believe this was the Florida law. They should have the right to sue the big tech companies. That might have been Texas, actually. I'm pretty sure one of those two. But in any event, at least for the Florida law was found to be unconstitutional in the courts. And invalid in the courts. And part of the reason was it was just preempted by Section 230. And the way our federal system works is that if a federal law speaks to an issue and it's a power within the federal government's power, it trumps any state law that would contradict it.
Yeah.
So having this broad grant of federal power really hurts the ability for states to protect their citizens from censorship.
Okay, but let me follow, because what I would like is like a specific example. Let's take, I don't know, Steven Crowder. He got demonetized by YouTube. Is that in this lane, or what? Give me an example of somebody we would know, or some kind of incident we would know where they exercise the power to remove in a way that you don't want them to be shielded for.
Oh, sure. Okay. Laura Loomer was removed from Twitter, for example, and she was actually the plaintiff in a major lawsuit against Twitter. She was represented by a lawyer, Ron Coleman, who actually wrote the white paper talking about 230 reform. And she was essentially suing Twitter to get her account reinstated, saying she was censored for political reasons. And that suit was thrown out of court on among other grounds, the idea that Section 230 precluded any sort of remedy.
All right, what about that case? So now we've sort of discussed some of the virtues of 230, but Will's zeroing in on C2, the removal, and how it was used. Laura Loomer's a controversial person. But this is always going to be used against, for the most part, people who you could dub controversial. I mean, half the time people call me controversial. It's like, okay, fine. So this is the problem, because in America, we don't tend to censor controversial speech. We tend to believe that the answer to controversial speech or speech you don't like is more speech, not less, not to censor the original offending comment.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to dig into here. And one of the most important pieces of context is, so C2, right, is part of Section 230, but it doesn't operate in a vacuum. All platforms, all businesses, all people are protected by the First Amendment. And that includes, right, the government can't censor speech, but the government also can't compel speech. No government, federal or state governments, can compel anyone to host speech or to make speech. And that's actually the main reason that the Texas and Florida laws are having so much trouble, and what the courts have been looking at. 230 obviously is involved, but the real question at the heart of those cases is, do those laws violate the First Amendment? And some courts have said yes, some courts have said no. It's likely the Supreme Court, they're looking at it right now. They will decide whether to take it up. They just asked for the Solicitor General to weigh in. And so I think there's kind of this idea that C2 is what enables platforms to take down speech, but in practice, it's really the First Amendment. And that's pretty in line with a lot of First Amendment
jurisprudence. Just to stop you, it's the social media companies' First Amendment right to take away a comment.
The same way that the court has found that a bakery has a First Amendment right to refuse to bake a gay wedding cake, the social media companies have their own First Amendment rights to not be censored and to not be compelled to host speech. So C2 really is a modifier to C1. This dates back to pre-internet laws about kind of like bookstores, and in courts looking at, how does someone who distributes someone else's speech, when can we hold them responsible? And in the 1990s, the courts were looking at different cases and said, if you moderate heavily and you miss something that should be illegal, then you're held responsible. And Congress stepped in and said, whoa, we don't want a world where you have a disincentive against moderation. We want platforms to be able to appeal to niche audiences, to be able to cater to specific people, to be able to provide safe spaces without things like porn or harassment or spam. And so that's why they put C2 in the law. And so while it is certainly an important part of the law, the First Amendment underlies kind of all content moderation. So I think that's just worth calling out. In addition to the First Amendment, when you sign up to a social media service, you sign a terms of use, terms of service agreement that usually bans lots of things, and it's really up to the platform what they include in that. But if you violate that terms of service, then you're totally allowed to be kicked off the platform. You violated the contract with the company, and so it's not as if absent 230. Twitter or whoever has a legal obligation to host your speech. It's just absent 230, they don't have to worry about fighting it out in court, which can cost millions of dollars versus getting it dismissed under 230, which only costs somewhere between a couple 10, maybe $100,000.
What about that, Will? So if Laura Loomer, if there were no Section 230, what would be her grounds for a lawsuit against Twitter for bouncing her off? Because it's a private company. They're like, we don't like you. We don't like the color of your hair. You're booted.
Right. Well, I mean, there's regulations on private companies, and there have been serious ones going back to the teens when it comes to common carrier type regulations, or the 1960s with civil rights and public accommodation. Slew of private companies are under various regulations that say you're compelled to provide service to people and you're not allowed to arbitrarily terminate it. That's not true in every aspect of the American economy, but it's true in many of them. And we don't see those necessarily as First Amendment violations of freedom of association. And another point, I mean, we were just talking about subsection C1, the point that because these platforms aren't speaking, because they're just hosting tons of user-generated content, well, they're obviously not the speaker, so they should be insulated from liability. But then all of a sudden, when you want to say, okay, well, you're not the speaker, so you should still be forced to host this other people's speech, because your platform is so huge, it's the public square. And then these companies all of a sudden say, whoa, you're violating our First Amendment's rights to speech. I think it's unfair for these companies to have it both ways. If they want liability protection for hosting user-generated content, then they should concede that they are not the speaker of that user-generated content and that their speech rights aren't being violated when a state, in their wisdom, decides to give their citizens the right to speak on that platform.
How about that, Kate? How can they argue out of one side of their mouths, we are not in control of the content, and out of the other side, oh, we are very much in control of the content?
I don't think any platform would ever say that they're in control of the content. I don't think that's a fight anyone thinks they can win. And I think this really kind of comes back.
Well, that's what C2 is. That's C2. The reason they are able to remove porn and Laura Loomer is C2. They are in control ultimately of the content.
I mean, they're in control of kind of the environment they create. But, we live in a world because of the internet and because of 230 where anybody can create and share content on the internet instantaneously, and not have to worry about, like YouTube, for instance. It used to be if you wanted to distribute a TV show, you had to hope that a cable channel and a TV studio and all the people necessary to participate in that process would agree to host you and to do that. You don't need that now. Anybody can upload anything to YouTube. And if YouTube, of course, has rules around what you can upload, they don't want things like terrorist content, which is at the heart of Gonzalez. They don't want porn. That's not the business they're in. So they're able to make those decisions. That doesn't make them ultimately liable for the speech, though. And I think if we lived in a world where they were liable for the speech, you would either have so much money and time spent on content moderation to the point where the internet stopped working the way we're used to it, where some human had to review every YouTube video before it's shared, which is crazy and not feasible considering how much content is shared, or companies would err on the side of not hosting things. And so to your point earlier, Megyn, if someone's deemed controversial, maybe it just automatically gets taken down. Maybe they just don't host any of that person's speech.
There's no platform at all. YouTube's like, you're out. Yeah, you're out. Forget monitoring your contents, and your content and your comments, you're done. You're not worth the risk. What about that, Will?
I mean, I basically agree that there would be a parade of horribles in a world where there wasn't some liability protection from user-generated content, and that these companies would have a very difficult time doing business. But what are we concerned about at the Internet Accountability Project and those of us on the right who want to regulate big tech? Well, we're concerned about censorship. We're concerned about major big tech monopolies using their monopoly power to censor political opinions they don't like. And we want to change the law to make it so, to constrain their ability to censor us. We see it as a sort of collective regime of private discrimination, and the remedy to that is state and federal law. And so from my perspective, I think the First Amendment debate will ultimately shake down in our favor, because there are a variety of precedents that suggest that, if you're not seen as the speaker, that states can protect the right of people to speak on your property, and essentially compel you to allow them to speak on your property. And that's pretty analogous here. So the 230 problem is that there's a federal law that stops states from protecting the rights of their own citizens. And so I'm willing to effectively concede the idea that these companies should have liability protection from user-generated content. And then you use that to say, you're not the speaker. We should have the right to constrain your ability to censor people if your platform is large enough.
So how would it work? Like, if you could revise 230, Will, you'd leave number one, C1 in place, where it says you're immune. You're not going to be liable for a comment. In other words, one of the good examples was Yelp. If you write a negative review of a restaurant on Yelp, the restaurant can sue you as the commentator, but they can't sue Yelp. And you guys are both in agreement that under C1, Yelp cannot get sued, and we don't want to mess with that. So how would you like to see C2, the one that lets them remove certain things like terrorist content, pornography, and so on? How would you like to see it changed to pull back on some of what many of us believe is political censorship, for the most part, of one particular viewpoint?
Sure. So one simple idea would be to remove the catch-all term that says that companies can remove content that is otherwise objectionable. That gives them a huge amount of leeway to remove content and preempts laws that would protect against political censorship. And another tweak to the law would just say that their good faith belief that the content is violative of their terms of service would have to be objectively reasonable rather than subjective. That would be another tweak to that law that would make it so that states could write their own laws protecting their citizens from censorship that also go along with an objectively reasonable good faith standard. And I think the ultimate world we're trying to lead to is one where people have a meaningful remedy and meaningful predictability about what content will get them kicked off platforms and what won't. And if they are arbitrarily censored, they'll have a remedy. They can go to court.
The thing that's attractive about that, Kate, is what Will was saying a moment ago, the public square, right? That these social media companies have become these behemoths that we never envisioned 20 years ago. I was just thinking about this because I talked to my old pal from Fox News, Rick Leventhal, the other day. And I was telling about how the coverage I saw on 9/11, 2001 was the reason I left the law and got into news. Well, that same time, I remember I was in Chicago, 2001 to 2002, and a friend of mine was dating a guy, and she said, "Oh, I Googled him." And I was like, "What does that mean?" This is 2002, right? What does it mean to Google somebody? That's 20 years ago. That's when, even before that, these laws were being passed to govern a body, the internet, the social media companies, that the lawmakers had no clue what they would look like, what they would be like, how important they would be to the public dialogue, right? So I see his point that this is the public square, and shouldn't we be revising the regulations that govern them, understanding now what the pros and cons of this whole thing are?
And I would say to that, if you like the way Twitter or Google or Meta is moderating content and you want more of that, then yeah, revise 230, because that will ensure that those are the only companies that can continue to exist absent the framework that 230 is created. There's a reason we are the global leader in internet companies that host content. And there's a reason that US policy has led to the kind of the vibrant internet world we have today. And changing it will ensure that only the largest companies that can afford to fight lawsuits, can afford to spend hundreds of millions of dollars on content moderation technology, can afford to hire tens of thousands of content moderators. There's a reason that those companies will be fine if you change 230. And in fact, several large companies probably would be okay with you changing 230. We come at it from the perspective of, what about the next generation of innovative and novel social media, but also other companies? And I think it's really easy, especially in political circles, to think that the internet is Twitter and the internet is Facebook. But it's not. There's a lot more than that. We talk to companies every day that are doing really cool, unique new things, including in the social media space. And if they don't have 230, they won't make it to be the next Facebook. And even looking at 10 years from now, let's say, I don't think there's a guarantee that Facebook or Twitter or Google will be the size they are anymore. I think there's been so much innovation in the social media space. It can feel, again, because we're kind of in this echo chamber, that we're just all on Twitter. But Discord is being used in new and innovative ways to essentially mimic social media. I wouldn't have predicted the rise of TikTok, and that's such a big platform for a lot of people. So I think it's dangerous to think that we're in this moment, we need to regulate specifically for this moment. When doing so, we'll tip the scales to ensure that only the largest companies can stick around. And I would like to see different companies in place in the next 10 years, but that they need 230 to grow, because they will be sued out of existence before they get a chance to really take off.
That's a good point, Will. If you can take one thing to the bank, it's the litigiousness of the American people.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a reason I said that I don't really want to touch C1. I take Kate's point, and I've believed for a long time that small startups especially need liability protection from user-generated content. That's not at all what my argument is. And I think my argument is indeed focused on the major tech platforms and the laws I advocate that protect people's right to speak, like essentially a private right of action for individuals, so they could walk into court and sue. Those laws would require that the defendant company have something like 100 million users or more, something more like that. I think it's not impossible to modify our laws in such a way that protects the immunity protections that startups and smaller tech companies have, while also protecting Americans' right to speak on these huge monopoly social media platforms. And whether those monopoly social media platforms change, it does seem to be the case that even if a new platform takes the place of an old one, most speech at any one given time is happening on one or two or three major social media platforms. And I think there is a genuine public interest in ensuring that whatever those social media platforms are, if they're Twitter today or TikTok today or something else tomorrow, whatever those platforms are, that Americans have a right to speak on them.
Okay, I like this case. So now to take it to an analogy from when I was growing up, he's not going to go after Ma Bell for the conversations you're having on the phone, he is going to go after them. He's going to make them subject to liability, but he's not going to get the two kids with the Campbell soup cans and the string attaching them, having their conversation. How about that? Does that assuage your concerns about the small startups?
No, I think, yes, we have the startup perspective. We talk to startup founders all the time, but we also are increasingly talking to internet creators who are also small business owners. I think it's really easy to dismiss internet creators as like dances on TikTok. But these are advocates and educators and comedians and musicians and artists. So it's a whole community, again, that I think only exists because of Section 230. And these people use these large platforms to run their businesses. And, they don't, by and large, want to live in a world where their content is served next to hate speech or where their content is served next to harassment. So the ability of even large platforms to remove speech that they feel like make their platform a dangerous and unwelcoming and irrelevant place to be is still really dangerous. And maybe the startups will be fine, although, of course, every startup wants to be big enough to kind of trigger some of these concerns and have that market power. But even taking the smaller platforms out of it, so many people, and you can disagree that the platforms are doing a good job. I actually don't think anybody thinks the platforms are doing a great job. So that's like a conversation that's worth having. But the legal framework that underlies the ability for a platform to say, no, actually, we're trying to be something specific and we don't want this hate speech. We don't want this racism. We don't want this harassment, this bullying. We don't want it on our platform. That's really important and keeps the internet, to the extent the internet is healthy and working, it's because platforms can make those decisions.
Oh boy. All right. Now that I was kind of with you until that last sentence. But the problem is what they think is hate speech it's absurd. I mean, truly, it is not possible to change your sex. If you are born a biological man, you're a man. Like that has been labeled hate speech on Twitter. So those of us who are in the camp of sanity are sick and tired of getting our factual-based conversations shut down. COVID was probably even better example, right? Where people are tweeting out like, the vaccines do not prevent the spread of COVID. Censored, right? Like that's what Will is trying to fight back against. Like it's actually having a seriously deleterious effect on our national conversation on knowable fact discussion. So how would you get after that?
And I think that's a perfect example of kind of why content moderation is so difficult. Like I said, I don't think anybody who says they're doing it perfectly, nobody would like credit the companies with doing it perfectly. But really, content moderation, especially at scale, is incredibly difficult. And that's why these companies invest so much in technological tools and human beings, both inside and outside the company, to try to review content. And
no. I got to jump in. No. I don't care how much they invest. And I'm not taking a side on this, but on this point, I don't care how much. You know what they need to invest in? Ideological diversity amongst the people making these calls. Because 9 times out of 10, these calls go against conservatives or people who are pushing back against liberal dogma. Take a look at John Stossel's expose on what happened to him when he tried to report on climate change. Facts, actual facts, and then had to run it up the Facebook authoritarian chain because they labeled it something like disinformation. And he got real live people. It was amazing to explain why they labeled it this. And even when he had proven to them that they were wrong and he wasn't, they wouldn't stand down. Like, that's completely aggravating. And I can speak to this personally. I went out to Facebook. I went to Google. I sat with the executives at YouTube, all of these social media. Back in 2016, they all invited me out to speak, so I did it. And they asked me, as I was like their favorite possible conservative, so I was at Fox at the time, but they loved me because I challenged Trump, right? This is back another day. What should we do? What should we do to solve some of these bias issues? And I said, for the love of God, get more conservatives on your editorial boards or who's ever making these censorship decisions. Real conservatives, not fake Lincoln, whatever project conservatives. And they didn't do it, Kate. It's not about money. It's about an ideological bent that they refuse to get off of because they share in it.
And I listen, I don't work for the large companies. I don't need to defend them. They have their own time and resources to do that. But I do think this just kind of speaks to the fact that there's no perfect answer, because all of the problems that you and Will have highlighted, those are pros to some members of Congress. You know, you might say that Josh Hawley and Elizabeth Warren are united in hating 230. That is true, but they want very different things. And for every time Facebook doesn't label something that is, you know, allegedly misinformation as misinformation, you have Democratic members of Congress writing to them, asking them why. And so the path on 230 reform isn't straight, because for every complaint you have, there's someone with the opposite complaint, and that pulls these companies in impossible directions.
But my complaint is real.
I'm so worried about 230.
But my complaint is real.
And I think Elizabeth Warren would say her complaint's real too.
So, Will, I realize Elizabeth Warren, she's not worried about a right-wing bias amongst the social media companies at all. She's a little odd, but she's not dumb. Elizabeth Warren is a smart lady. She's worried about this hate speech and all, you know, quote unquote hate speech and all that stuff. So what do you make of the exchange that Kate and I just had on what the real problem is inside of these companies and how we get at it?
Well, Kate makes the point that social media moderation is very difficult because there's pressure coming from all sorts of ways, and you don't know exactly what speech you should remove. And I sympathize with that, right? These companies are vulnerable to both external and internal pressure campaigns from activists, employees, and also pressures from federal government agencies, as we saw with the Twitter files when they go at these companies and say, hey, you should be doing this or that. And so part of why I think my proposals and the proposals for these private rights of action are so useful and would be very good for these companies is that it would say, no, all this is against the law, right? If we do what you say, activist, if we remove this person from their account, or we ban this COVID misinformation, whatever you say, if we did that, we would be sued and we would lose. So we're not going to do that. It would allow them to fire a slew of all these people who are essentially interacting with all these activists and really liberate them to just focus on, okay, what are the core elements of moderation we need to focus on? Child sexual abuse material. Good. Yeah, let's get rid of that. Porn, et cetera. But in terms of, they would be completely out of the political censorship debates, which is, I think, where they should be. And I think, you're absolutely right that these companies have a liberal bias, in general. But I think really a good analogy is actually, you go back to the civil rights era. A lot of small businesses that were enforcing Jim Crow didn't necessarily want to be. They weren't making money hand over fist, but they were faced with a collective regime of private discrimination in the South. And it was federal civil rights law that created the environment in which they could say to, say, a racist customer, guess what? No, we're not discriminating, because if we did so, it would be against the law. These are essentially liberating constraints for these companies that would allow them to get out of the business of censorship entirely and focus on what matters.
Okay, but you're talking about like the non-racist shop owner who wanted to be liberated. And what I'm telling you is there is not the non-liberal shop owner amongst the social media giants in control who wants to be liberated.
Well, sure. I'm giving Kate a steel man here, where we assume that indeed the problem is not the liberal bias of these companies, but instead how messy and difficult moderation is. It's like, okay, well, even if that's the case, then you should be looking for laws that constrain you from having to engage in these muddy censorship debates in the first place, and just say, the whole category of this censorship would be against the law and would get you sued.
You're basically saying, I'm going to get Josh Hawley and Elizabeth Warren off your backs. Here, I'm here to save the day. By the way, I should say, there are some conservatives inside of YouTube and Facebook and so on. It's just obviously not at the top in control and deciding all the editorial direction. Go ahead, Kate.
This falls back onto the First Amendment problem, right? Like and it's even more complicated because these companies are in the business of hosting speech, and they can't be compelled to host speech under the First Amendment that they don't want to. I know there's like the shopping mall analogy, and there's past cases that look at like similar sounding things, but the courts that are examining the Florida and Texas laws feel differently, and ultimately maybe the Supreme Court will weigh in.
But wait, can I jump in there? Can I jump in there just to so I'm want to make sure I'm in the right space mentally. So like AT&T, I mentioned them before, right? It was a private company, and they wouldn't have been allowed to jump in on my private phone conversation and say, you can't say that, and cut the line, right? It's a public utility. Like you can't, even though it was a private company. And there was a piece by Vivek Ramaswamy and Jed Rubenfeld of Yale Law School in the Wall Street Journal a year plus ago, arguing that the social media companies should be treated as such, that they crossed over public square. Again, they're so big and they're so vital to the national conversation now. They should be treated more like a public entity that doesn't have the liberties they once had. Are we on the same page about like the difference? Because you're saying a private company, they should be able to moderate the speech, however they feel. And there is an argument that they're not just this little private company anymore.
Well, and Will mentioned earlier the idea of a common carrier, right? And a common carrier legally is something very specific. It is a company usually that's much more highly regulated and holds itself out as a neutral conduit. So the phone company, right? Like anybody can't just go launch their own phone company. You have to dig up 1 million miles of land and put in cell towers and all this stuff, right? So it's not as if that's something that anybody can just get up and do. And it is very highly regulated. Phone companies are very highly regulated by the Federal Communications Commission. And there is a lot of government interplay with how phone companies work and what they need from the government. So they are common carriers and they can't step in. They don't pretend to, right? When you sign up for a phone, you don't sign an agreement saying, I won't use certain words, or I won't say certain things, or I won't talk about certain topics. So they are a common carrier. Social media platforms have never made that promise. That's not what they're out here to do. And in fact, and something I think is worth talking about when we talk about moderation, curation and moderation can be really valuable. For instance, like, if there's an example we always come back to in this space around Reddit, there's a subreddit of cats standing on their hind legs. It is literally just people posting pictures of cats on their hind legs. And if you upload a picture of a dog on its hind leg, it will get removed because that's not the purpose of that forum. And Twitter or YouTube or Facebook or anyone can say, and the purpose of our forum is not, parade of horribles that we're worried about. And so I don't think, I don't know that legally there's a pathway forward for these companies to be considered common carriers, but that's not how they hold themselves out to be. And all of the startups we work with who want to compete with these companies, they don't want to be competing to get one day essentially like taken over by government regulation. They don't want to live in a world where if they get big enough, they become a public utility and they get regulated as such. And it would be a very hard time attracting investors if you had to know that at the end of the successful road was government intervention because you've been deemed too big.
The crackdown. Will, can I ask you, and then we'll take a quick break. Right now, am I correct that if Twitter or let's say Facebook wanted to say all conservative viewpoint is censored, we don't want any conservative viewpoint, get out. It's all going to be pulled. It would be a bad business decision, but legally they can do that, right?
We might have a remedy in Texas and we might have a remedy in Florida, depending on whether or not those laws have gotten through the courts yet. I mean, there's some tweaking, but as a general rule, I don't know that we would have a legal remedy under current law. I think that's obviously why that law needs to change. I mean, and I think one of the things in general is that conservatives have relied on the fact that it seems obviously in the entrepreneurial interests of these companies not to mistreat conservatives. And so we don't need to regulate them, but it's pretty apparent after the last 4 years that entrepreneurial interest is not enough to defeat the behavior of these monopolists. And the fact that they have a monopoly is the reason why they feel so comfortable censoring in the first place, why they have the freedom to censor, if you will.
And just to be clear, they cannot say no blacks on the platform, no disabled people, no women. That's not lawful, right? Because those are protected classes. But political thought, your ideology as a conservative or otherwise, that's not protected. And then more and more, even though, conservatives on the internet, at least, are kind of treated like they're not in the country, and therefore they don't have protected status. And it's sort of this tension because the libs do control most of these platforms. They control Hollywood, they control sports, they control media. And so the conservatives are actually a minority, but they're not recognized as a protected class.
Right. And I think we don't have to get into detail about which classes need to be protected. Just say that everybody should have the right to be able to speak on social media, and that your First Amendment right to speak is not particularly meaningful if you can't speak on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, the major social media platforms of the day, because that's where political debate is.
Yeah, but it's not a government company. I mean, right, this is one of the things. If this were run by Joe Biden, it would be fine. Like it would be a First Amendment issue, but it's run by a private company who can say, you have red hair and I won't serve you.
Right. Well, I mean, that's why we need to regulate private companies. And I think contrary to Kate, the idea that these companies can't be regulated as common carriers because they are not currently heavily regulated, well, that's a circular argument. You're saying we can't regulate them because they're not currently regulated. Historically, common carrier regulation has been imposed upon companies that didn't want to be common carriers, that didn't want the obligation to not to serve everybody equally, imposed on them. That was the the trains. I think in the 1880s was the first time that this came about, because you had monopoly train lines in the very first days of train tracks going across the country, and they had the ability to discriminate and price discriminate against different customers, and the customers were just SOL if they had a problem with that. So the federal government said in their wisdom, federal government said in their wisdom, these are private companies, yes, but for the good of all, they need to be regulated, and we're going to make you serve everybody.
This is so interesting. I'm really enjoying this. All right, let me take a quick break, and then we'll come back. We'll talk about what's happening at the Supreme Court and how it relates to everything we've just discussed. So the audience is going to be super smart when that case gets decided. Stand by. All right, Kate. So the Supreme Court is getting involved in this in a case called Gonzalez versus Google. And I understand you're involved in this case. So give us Gonzalez for Dummies. What is this?
Yeah, absolutely. And to be clear, not involved personally, but we have filed an amicus brief and helped another group file an amicus brief as well. So Gonzalez is essentially asking the question, who should be responsible for terrorist content online? And is it the platform that hosts it? And what if the platform might allegedly recommend the content? Then at what point does the platform become responsible, in addition to obviously the terrorist group posting the content?
Okay. And so is Google alleging that it should not be responsible if terrorist content gets posted on, say, YouTube?
Yeah. So this stems from, again, this is all allegations, but the accusation here is that YouTube not only hosted, but recommended ISIS content. And then that there was an ISIS terrorist attack, and there were unfortunately victims, and one of the victims' family is suing. And Google has told the court that its hosting and recommendations are both protected by 230. And lots of other people have weighed in, including us. We feel strongly that recommendations should be protected by 230. Lots of startups use recommendations to kind of as their competitive advantage. That's how they appeal to their users, by being able to recommend and curate specific content. And then additionally, we worked with several internet creators, so YouTube creators on TikTok and other platforms, to explain why recommendations are so important as people are trying to build out an audience.
Does Google acknowledge that this was a mistake, that this was not a good thing to do?
So Google certainly, and to their credit, all of the large companies invest heavily in finding and removing terrorist content. This is one of the most collaborative and aggressive places that content moderation exists on the internet today, is around terrorist content. So nobody is saying terrorist content online is a good thing. Nobody's arguing that. I'm not sure that it is even true that Google or that YouTube did host this content. I think that's something that would be discussed in court if we were talking about a kind of full jury trial where we're looking at the facts of the case. But because we're talking about the legal mechanisms here, that's like not even a question. It's just, should they be able to get sued if they did host and recommend content?
And where is the case coming up to the Supreme Court from? What circuit was it decided in, and how did it go at the lower court level?
So Google did win at the lower court level. I'm not sure exactly which circuit it came from, but I think kind of this follows traditional 230 jurisprudence. Normally, when it comes to content somebody else created, platforms are able to assert 230 and they're able to win. And so this is the victim's family trying to challenge that ruling.
So is this a C1 case? Like somebody else posted the controversial stuff and we don't have any liability for it?
Yes, so this is C1. The Supreme Court is also thinking about taking up these two Texas and Florida cases, which again are being challenged on the First Amendment, but are part of the C2 conversation. But that would be separate and likely next year at this point. This is, like you said, happening next week, and it's just about C1 and liability for hosting and recommending the content.
Usually, Will, it's not a good sign if you won at the lower court level and the Supreme Court takes the case. Yeah. So I'm sure Google's not feeling too great about the fact that they're being forced to argue this in front of SCOTUS, but this isn't necessarily something that divides along ideological lines perfectly. So I don't know. How do you think this is likely to go? And what's unique about it if C1 is kind of not as controversial?
So I think it's probably going to get reversed. I think that Google's probably going to lose because I don't think that, as you suggest, I don't think the Supreme Court would have taken it if they weren't leaning in that direction. I think it's really a question about the breadth of the C1 immunity grant. And I think, in other cases, courts have interpreted that really broadly to protect almost everything that these companies are doing with relation to user-generated content on the internet. And so I think the Supreme Court sees this as an opportunity to narrow that grant of immunity to merely like, you're not liable, you're not the publisher of the speech, we get that. But that doesn't necessarily insulate you from liability for overtly recommending the content to others. That's not to say we couldn't have other laws if we deemed that in their wisdom it was smart to do that. But I think, I'm not super familiar with this case because I'm not a Google, I'm not involved in the case. We didn't file an amicus or anything like that. But I lean towards the side of saying the courts have probably interpreted the C1 grant of immunity too broadly beyond its text, and that this is a good opportunity to constrain it and say that companies actually are ultimately responsible for the things they overtly do, and that ultimately there is somebody harmed at the end of the day here. So it's not a bad idea to say that to constrain to interpret liability grants somewhat narrowly.
Yeah, because Kate, correct me if I'm wrong, but the thing here is that promotion is not the same as just hosting the content.
I think in a lot of ways it is the same. And I actually really worry about the ability of the Supreme Court from like a technological level to distinguish. But I mean, every time you search something, whether it's on Google or Bing or anywhere else, right? Like that's an algorithm telling you what it thinks you want to see. So it's not just kind of like the YouTube recommendations that we're worried about. Although I also think YouTube recommendations play a large role in a lot of content discovery. There's a lot of YouTube out there. There's a lot of internet out there. And recommendations are really what enable platforms to try to give their users an experience they think the user wants to see. And absent those recommendations, because if they remove 230, why would anybody recommend anything ever again? You would be taking full responsibility for it. Absent 230 and absent recommendations, I worry the internet becomes like a needle in a haystack, a phone book that's not alphabetized, hodgepodge, trying to figure out what you actually want to see and how to find it online.
Wait, so let me ask you something. So that's a valid concern. So if let's say they lose this case, Google owns YouTube. So let's say they lose this case, and just the mere promotion. I mean, when I hear promotion, I think, hey, look at this ISIS video, but it could just be the algorithm returning a result to searching people who are searching for something. So it could be less pernicious than that. So could it be the case that, as a result, in the opposite side of a negative ruling for them, you've got Google and YouTube saying, we're not going to promote, like, here's a list of 1,000 people who are considered controversial, who we're not going to promote at all. Like, YouTube's no longer going to promote, hey, check in. Again, some people say I'm controversial. No sane person says it. But like, Megyn Kelly's on the list. Don't promote her show. Or let's take somebody more realistic, like Steven Crowder, who is controversial. It could just be like, don't even touch it. Don't promote it. Don't allow YouTube to promote it. That could be an outcome of this.
Absolutely. I mean, and I have no idea what YouTube is thinking. Again, I don't work there. I'm not sure what they're talking about internally, although I'm sure they're talking about something. But it's even broader than that, right? It could be politics is controversial. Medicine is controversial. We're just not going to recommend anything in that space. And I think that gets really scary and really dangerous. And it's something, we told the court, we think that this could have much broader impacts than just algorithmic recommendations and terrorist content. But I think lots of people have weighed in with concerns about the impact this will have on free expression.
Oh, all right. Well, I'll give you the last word on this because we got to wrap it up. But how do you think people should be looking at this issue? I mean, fair-minded people who don't want these catastrophic outcomes that Kate is talking about, but also feel like there's an injustice in this system.
I mean, yeah, you don't have to abolish 230 to regulate social media companies in a way that protects people's right to speech. We are allowed to write new laws to solve new problems. 230 was designed to solve a problem of the early 90s, internet forums being unable to moderate any sort of content at all without getting liable for defamation. We just need to write a new law that says, here's a way to solve social media censorship on political grounds.
And are you an Elizabeth Warren supporter now?
No.
No, I didn't think so. You guys, great debate. Really super appreciate all of your information and thoughtful exchanges. Thanks for being here. Hey, Hey everyone, I'm Megyn Kelly. Welcome to the Megyn Kelly Show. Oh my gosh, we have so much goodness for you today. Overnight, all eyes were on the campus of UCLA. University officials finally allowing LAPD and the California Highway Patrol to come in and fully dismantle an encampment built up on the college campus. You know, they kind of tried to tear it down, and then the students came back, and now this was the final, we think, for now at least, tear down. But before it was actually dismantled, an LA-based freelance reporter named Anthony Cabasa went inside of it, and he has given us permission to show what he found. Look at this. The walls of one building, spray painted all over with messages like Free Gaza and Intifada. Well, they love that one. Protesters were seen wearing masks and headscarves to hide their faces. Some also donned white protective hard helmets. That was weird. Here you see a makeshift barrier built out of large plywood boards. It had been rebuilt after being torn down the night before. A short time later, around 3 a.m. LA time, police moved in. Protesters all wearing those same white helmets, now armed with umbrellas, battling police. But they had totally peaceful intentions. One protester screaming, "This is a school! We fucking learn!"
This is a fucking school! This is a fucking school! What are you doing? This is a school! We fucking learn!
Oh, you learn all right. You're going to learn the hard way, sir. Hear that, LAPD? They're just there for their studies. That's all, just sweet little university co-eds and their boyfriends just trying to get a better education. We're here to fucking learn. At one point, the police retreated from the encampment. This is video from ABC Local in LA. Their chopper overhead clearly shows the officer pulling back. But eventually, the LAPD did move back in, and again, freelancer Anthony Cabasa was on the scene. You see LAPD officers busting through the encampment. These students tried to resist. By 9 a.m. this morning, the encampment was completely torn down. However, a New York Times reporter on the scene heard the protesters chanting, "We will rebound," with all of our fucking learning. They're so sad they can't resume. What do you mean? I thought we're here to learn. Let's do the learning, honey. Rebound exactly for what? We're now asking. It's not going to go very well for you now that the cops are actually involved. That was the only thing that needed to happen here. It finally did happen. And now you're done. Okay? It's kind of fun watching you eat your own, but with all the Jew hatred you've been spewing, it got a little less fun, and now you're done. Yesterday, a spokesperson for the encampment, do you believe they have actual spokespeople? But I'm so glad that we met this woman. I've got a lot to say about a lot of these spokespeople. This particular gal let it be known that divestment is not really the end goal. She said the quiet part out loud. She wants to take down at least the whole university system.
I think it's more than divestment as well. I think given the fact that the University of California is founded on colonialism, it's inherently a violent institution. There needs to be an addressment of U.S. imperialism.
Okay. We haven't got a lot that we have to get to, thanks to these great protesters drawing our attention to all the colonialism everywhere. Joining me now, our friends from the Fifth Column podcast, Michael Moynihan, Camille Foster, and Matt Welsh. Go support them at wethefifth.substack.com. Don't miss a moment. Subscribe to this show on YouTube and follow me on Insta, Facebook, and X. Like many of you, I've been trying to eat healthier these days, and that's why I love good olive oil. Oh, it makes such a nice difference if it's really good. And by good, I mean fresh. Olive oil packs the most flavor and healthiest nutrients when it's fresh from the farm. That's the problem with supermarket olive oils. They're not fresh. They can sit on the shelf for months, growing stale. Now, I want to tell you about TJ Robinson, also known as the olive oil hunter. TJ's farm fresh oils have vibrant, grassy flavors. They're incredibly delicious on salad, veggies, pasta, meat, fish, you name it. And as an introduction to his fresh pressed olive oil club, TJ will send you a full-size $39 bottle of one of the world's finest artisanal olive oils, fresh from the new harvest, for just $1 to help him cover shipping. There's no commitment to buy anything now or ever. So you can get your free $39 bottle for just $1 in shipping and taste the difference freshness makes. Go to harvestfreshnow.com. harvestfreshnow.com for a free bottle and pay just $1 in shipping. harvestfreshnow.com. Guys, great to see you again. You're the perfect guest for today. My God, have we got some goodness for you. Let's just start with that, lady. It's all the colonialism is the real problem. Everything's violent here, and therefore the real goal is just, I guess, the dismantling of structures like UCLA. What do you make of what's happening here?
Who wants to do the first addressment?
Yeah.
Do you want to do an addressment?
There's so much for you. Everyone can go first at some point because I have equally good stuff coming after this one.
Michael, can you do a land addressment first?
I want to first tell the people that are applying to UCLA next year that you can get a spokesman gig at UCLA by making up words like addressment, which isn't a word. You're at university. Get a fucking dictionary. This is I think this is the great reveal, right? I mean, we all know this. We all know that these people don't know anything about Gaza. You see these constant videos of like, from what river to what sea? They're like, I don't know, the Mississippi to the Lake Michigan. It's like, no, the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea. They don't know anything about this stuff. And that's obvious. What they are, interested in is cosplaying, is role playing, is doing their little two-step and trying to pretend that they're 1968 revolutionaries. The difference, by the way, a slight aside that I noticed is that in the 1968 protests on campus, particularly Columbia, the professors weren't on their side. This is new, that the professors are out there standing cheek to jowl with them. But yeah, I mean, when they say like UCLA system was built on colonialism, like that is fantastically incoherent. I mean, I suppose you're saying California or the world. I mean, everything's built on colonialism. And this is, of course, the way that they see Israel, too, as a settler colonialist project. Again, phrases that are the stock phrases of people on the radical left these days. And it seems that most of them don't know what they mean. So it doesn't surprise me that when they're out there, like, they're not thinking about Gaza. I think the other thing, and this is the thing that you have to say, and you sound like some kind of crazy John Birch reactionary, but honestly, their issue is with America. I mean, that's always at the end of it. It's America supporting Israel. It's what America does. It's America's founding. It's everything. And it's always back to being on the other side of the United States of America. I don't know if you saw this video of the horseshoe theory in action of two people across from each other at UCLA saying, "Fuck Biden." They were chanting at each other.
We have that. Actually, let's play it. Let's play it. That was a lovely moment of unity, actually. That one actually made me feel kind of like, there's hope for the future. Hold on. Do we have it ready? Stand by. This is University of Alabama.
Call and response.
That's the other. That's the other side that chimed in. Secondly, this is video from Maven Navarro at the Crimson White student newspaper. The Crimson White. I guess there's a crimson. I don't know how it works.
That's a problem.
You can get in trouble with a name like that in today's days. It's just the white.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway,
I regret the Trump erasure there. Can we just get both of them and all of the chance for doing this?
Erasure.
Soon enough.
I think that the UCLA has been so badly mismanaged, even compared to Columbia, that it's worth pointing out. And it's also that we've lost the plot in America over the last 5+ years, maybe 8, 9, whatever, about public disorder. Right? Like we saw the clashes, the kind of, gang riot vigilante clashes that happened the night before, right? At UCLA, because they had allowed for a long time there to be people squatting on public universities' land and creating a zone where people were not allowed to move freely into campus, shutting down classes effectively, blocking the building of people. When someone's walking through with the Star of David, they're like, you can't come here. The campus authorities allowed that for a long time. And what's going to happen when you have a sense of people are threatening or impeding the freedom of other humans and can act with impunity? There's going to be a counter protest there that's going to become violent and ugly, which is exactly what happened because they lost the idea that you can't have that type of disorder in a public space. It's not, I mean, Joe Biden actually talked about this morning, and it wasn't a great address. But the one thing that he said that is right is like speech is fine, violence is not. It's kind of simple. And there's no reason why you can't act upon that. But UCLA didn't. They acted cowardly and kind of let this thing fester for a long time. And that's going to inevitably lead to this ugliness and a kind of a conflict-ridden dispersal of people. It shouldn't be that hard to outsmart a bunch of half-witted college students.
Mm-hmm. I heard the folks at Commentary talking yesterday about how the sheer numbers of cops are what kept order. Sending in all those cops at UCLA and Columbia is actually, that's why things didn't get worse than they did. You need more cops, not fewer, to disperse this kind of a situation. And that kept the peace, because you're having some on the left freak out about why the number of cops. You know what? To keep everybody safe, including the cops and the students themselves. They've all been through many, many trainings, especially in New York, and how to disperse a riot, or never mind a protest or like this. So I trust the boys in blue. They're not perfect, but here they handled it themselves impeccably, and they managed to break up these protests without too much. Go ahead, Camille.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't want to see clouds of tear gas, a legion of rubber bullets unleashed on these particular crowds, you're going to need to see a lot of cops, individuals down there, in some cases 2 and 3 cops, dragging people off, loading them into buses. You're engaged in a political demonstration. You know that you're in breach of perhaps the law, certainly the policy of the university on the campus that you attend, to the extent you're a student. You have an expectation that at some point this is going to come to an end. And it may end with your demands being met. More than likely, it's going to end with you having some sort of plastic handcuffs put on your wrist, and being loaded into a bus and getting processed someplace, and maybe spending a couple hours at the police precinct. And it is important to differentiate between what is acceptable here and what is not. Of course, free speech is a thing. We vehemently support it and endorse it. You can have all of the multisyllabic words that you want and not worry about how to define them, whether it's colonialism or intifada. You don't know what these words mean, but you shout them. Same thing with genocide. But what you can't do is set up these encampments on the yard. You cannot become a squatter on your campus, and you can't accost people who are just trying to go to class. The fact that Columbia and UCLA and all of these prestigious universities have found themselves completely under siege and locked down as a result of these protests, I mean, is damning. And I think it is appropriate to scrutinize the administration at all of these universities. But I think it is imperative that we also just make certain that we are connecting all of this dysfunction with the kind of craziness that we have been talking about on our podcast for years now. Like the craziness of 2020, the craziness of January 6th, and the craziness of what's taking place on campus now. All of it is in important ways part of the same insane political fervor. And at some point, and I think we're starting to see it now, more moderate elements of our politics, the more reasonable the people in our country, the silent majority, to borrow a phrase, are going to have to stand up for themselves and insist that they do not want to see these kinds of radical demonstrations on their campuses. They don't want their politics to be defined by these people who are clearly at the fringe of with respect to what most Americans actually think, whatever you think about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
I'll give Joe Scarborough a nice shout out here, because we make fun of that show enough. But he put a fine point on it this morning. He had to call MSNBC viewers dumb in order to do it. Okay. But I give you this statement and let it stand on its own. Watch.
The riots on college campuses, the riots at the Chicago Convention, all of those things moved my family from being Democrats their entire life to being Republicans. If you're offended by this, please, I'm trying to help you. I don't want Donald Trump to get elected, all right? There you go. Trying to help you. If you're too stupid to figure that out, you change to another channel. This is not helping the people of Gaza, and this is not helping those of us who want to fight fascism in America. There's a reason the Reagan Revolution took place. The seeds were planted in 1968.
Okay, so a lot of issues with that statement, but you know, he has to stop fascism here in America, so we have to stop these protests. That's really what he's saying. But he's not wrong about what a turnoff this is to all sane people, Democrat and Republican.
No, I mean, he's absolutely right about a few things. I mean, it is absolutely true that the seeds of this were planted, and I would even go further back and say, like Mario Silva, the people in Berkeley in the free speech movement in 1963, which was much calmer, but that was the kind of when it started. And that kind of tumult, and that really changed people. And he's right about that. There's other elements that the Reagan Revolution happens in late 70s and of course 1980 when it really happens. But that said, is that I mean, this is an own goal in so many ways. And to add, to bind these two questions to what Camille was saying before. I mean, we have been talking about this on our show for many, many years, and we believe in the rights of all of these people to be as stupid as possible and as public a way as possible, because this is the great disinfectant, to see these half-wits shouting about intifada and then pointing out to their parents and to people listening to this program that the second intifada killed over 1,000 Israelis, most of whom were civilians in suicide bombings, et cetera. So you have kids shouting that we would like suicide bombings, I suppose, or they can claim ignorance. I'm glad they have that right. They don't have a right to block people's access. They don't have a right to shut things down. They don't have a right to, deface things and smash windows and shut down the campus.
Buildings.
Hijack buildings. They were not allowed to go to class. So I think the two things here is that Joe Scarborough is right, is that keep going, guys. Keep going, because this is an own goal. You think that
he senses the danger for his side, and he's right.
He knows it, but he's right. I mean, look at what happened in 2020. This is the racial reckoning. How did that work out? Do you think that ultimately benefited Democrats and liberals in a way that people said, this is the direction that I want my country going? These protests, these riots, these things set on fire. Every time I order something from Amazon, it's telling me that Ibram X. Kendi's coming to my house to deliver it. I mean, there's I don't need this all times. And I love looking at the stupidity. And I want to add one final thing, Megyn. You showed a clip there. And I was bleary-eyed in bed this morning, and I read this. So when I saw the clip of it saying, we go to school, you cut it off at a key point. I want to read you the whole clip because I want to make sure that people understand how smart kids in our Ivy League are, who says, this is a fucking school. It's a fucking school. What are you doing? This is a school. We fucking learned the final sentence. I got to learn about public health. That's literally, according to the Daily Mail, look it up.
It must be true.
He's screaming at the NYPD, I got to learn about public health. Oh my God. Like the fact that he didn't get a baton across the face says a lot about the NYPD. Thank you, guys.
Can I underscore one thing you said?
No, wait.
But here's the thing. Whatever.
So they're all out there, and you heard the woman in the opening clip about UCLA saying this is founded on violent colonialism, and therefore it's an inherently violent institution, and that's really our ultimate goal here. Don't worry. If you are at UCLA, or perhaps the sponsor of the university, or a taxpayer, I guess if you're in California, you're a taxpayer there, of the university, fear not. Because these protesters at UCLA and elsewhere, to be honest, they are not to be feared. Because we've seen what they need in order to just maintain their 2-day encampment, and you can't make it up. I've seen the full list now. I'd heard the highlights, but this is the full list. Okay, Fox's Bill Malugin got it and posted it on X. All right, here, the sampling that we've seen already in the media, I'll read. They are demanding, now they've been dispersed, but were demanding, as of 24 hours ago, vegan and gluten-free food, super bright flashlights with strobe. Sure, I'm sure that cops would love to see that brought in. Rope and zip ties, no problem. I'm sure that's for completely upstanding learning purposes. Helmets, shields, and wood. Lotion. Okay. No sunscreen. Tissues. Absolutely. A little, DVD with a player. No sunscreen. They're feeling really, really strongly about no sunscreen. That's capital N, capital O. Knee and elbow pads. I refer you back to the lotion. And above all, no bananas. No bananas whatsoever.
Again, the lotion.
Yeah.
But I missed that one more hand. Okay, so now, hold on. Now this is where you get the fine print. I'm going to bring up my reading glasses to read the fine print. Okay, here's some more. Gas masks and respirators. Sure, no problem. What could possibly go wrong? Utility gloves, especially for small hands. Lotion. EpiPens and non-steroid inhalers. I mean, obviously, this group is going to be riddled with all sorts of issues. Is anyone surprised? They, of course, no nuts because of all the allergies that these EpiPen and non-steroid inhaler people are suffering from. Rope, zip ties, I mentioned, and on it goes. So I feel like we're going to survive because it sounds like these people are too busy with their like rashes and allergic reactions and whatever they're doing with the knee pads and the lotion to really attack and take down UCLA. But what do you guys think?
It sounds like they're going into a tunnel for 6 months. I mean, they're trying to be Hamas. It's amazing. I don't think the Hamas guys are like, no nuts. It's very tight quarters. I don't think that's happening. But yeah, this is. I will. Matt,
is Hamas Russian?
It's Triumph the Insult Comic Dog. Apparently,
are all one-hand accents.
Okay, but can we discuss the no bananas? Yes, we have no bananas because
yes.
Like, who's got such a severe banana? Okay, but whatever. If you are so severely allergic to bananas that you have to issue warnings to people, not to, then don't show up at the damn protest. Okay,
this is true.
Number one,
I say this
go ahead.
With a 15-year-old who has a severe hazelnut allergy, and if she was camping out for the Intifada, I suppose I would want them to not throw hazelnuts and Nutella at her face. But also, she might not do that, and she would have brought her EpiPen because even she's not a moron. But there is somebody like we talked about this on an episode, and on our comments, someone says, "I'm the person who has the severe banana allergy, and I've gone into anaphylaxis or whatever it's called because of it."
Anaphylactic shock.
Anaphylactic shock in the past. So it does exist. Anaphylactic. But again, there's a real great way to avoid going into anaphylactic shock at your Hamas encampment outside of Sproul Hall, which is maybe don't do that. And
not for nothing. Don't call attention to the fact that you're allergic to bananas because what happened next was entirely predictable. And now they're also claiming additional victimization because what happened was the pro-Israel counter-protesters came, waving bananas. Waving bananas all over.
The security guy turns around. He takes a blow.
What is happening?
Into laughter.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. The thing that we'll learn about this war is something we always knew is that Jews are funny. So, they're going to bring bananas to the protest because they're a funny people. After that much torture for so many years, they become very funny. So.
As Iowa Hawk pointed out, don't bring your banana allergy to a fight against the people who invented comedy. That's just it's not going to work.
Yeah,
these protesters do such a disservice to the people who they are ostensibly protesting in support of. The fact that so many of these people would describe themselves as anti-war while they are unfurling banners with the word Intifada scrawled in red on it is just so insane to me.
It depends on who's doing all the dying, Camille.
But I'm convinced that most of these people don't actually know what it is that they are in support of. They certainly don't know what they're demonstrating for. Like, we've seen that over and over again. But that said, it is hard not to regard you as inherently dangerous when you insist on describing everything in the most insane with the most insane maximalist condemnations. And then you use language like that frivolously, consistently. It is maddening. It's really hard to determine when we're looking at someone who is just a blinkered idiot who is obviously misled and someone who is a genuine bona fide anti-Semite. It is hard to disentangle that in this particular moment. And they're not making it any easier.
We have reason to believe there may be terrorist affiliated people in these protests and also helping organize around these protests. I'll get to that in just a bit. And then there are the morons who I don't want to leave just yet. Okay, I want to stay with me. Let's just stay on the morons for another minute before we get to the truly nefarious ones. We showed some of this video, but here is this woman who her name is unfortunately Johanna King Slutsky. And she's at, I know, it's sad, sorry. That's what made her so bitter. I mean, that's, you can see it. Like,
I mean, it could
if
be
your
a
last name
great
is
name.
Slutsky,
If you really run with it.
you should change it. Like Smith is
One
fine.
hand has suggestions.
I have some
Like, why don't you
suggestions.
stick with that? I mean, frankly, I don't understand the last name Cox either. I don't, Dick is also bad. I'm sorry, but they are. Anywho, Slutsky is over at, and by the way, it's hyphenated. So she could have just gone with Johanna King. That's not bad. Who's like, I'll keep the hyphen Slutsky. Like, what? You're really trying to send a message. Anywho, there she is at Columbia enacting her bitterness live in front of the camera for us all. She's one of the leaders. And you may have seen this the other day, but she was demanding that they be allowed to ferret up food and other supplies to the people who had overtaken this hall, Hamilton Hall. And these are the terms that she described it in. Take a listen to Top 4.
Why should the university be obligated to provide food to people who've taken over a building?
Well, first of all, we're saying that they're obligated to provide food to students who pay for a meal plan here.
But you mentioned that there was a request that food and water be brought in, unless I misunderstood.
To allow it to be brought in. I mean, well, I guess it's ultimately a question of what kind of community and obligation Columbia feels it has to its students. Do you want students to die of dehydration and starvation or get severely ill, even if they disagree with you? If the answer is no, then you should allow basic, I mean, it's crazy to say because we're on an Ivy League campus, but this is like basic humanitarian aid we're asking for. Like, could people please have a glass of water?
But they did put themselves in that very deliberately.
They're water fountains.
Situation and in that position. So it seems like you're sort of saying, we want to be revolutionaries, we want to take over this building. Now, would you please bring us food and water? And
Nobody's asking them to bring anything. We're asking them to not violently stop us from bringing in basic humanitarian aid.
Without sound.
We are looking for a commitment from them that they will not stop it violently.
They haven't stopped it yet.
Well, I don't know to what extent it has been attempted, but we're looking for a commitment.
Those poor children.
I told you.
Oh my God, Miss Slutsky. What have you
King
wrought?
Slutsky.
Can someone also point out finally that behind her there is a guy
midriff.
with like a half shirt on
Yeah.
who
We came
clearly would
prepared
be
for you,
thrown off a
Moynihan.
building
We have a
in
full
Gaza?
screen close up of the guy behind her, just for you. Do I know
Yes.
my fifth column
Yes.
men, or do I not? Look at this guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, what a
That-
tragedy.
It is.
There's, for
love
the
that.
listening
I mean,
audience, you can see full midriff and belly button of this
Yeah.
Hamas
this is-
supporting
This is
gentleman.
so sad.
That's what Hamas
America's
wears in the battlefield.
great.
That's
He's
what. That's their
truly,
uniform.
Truly disadvantaged. He's shopping at Zara Kids to buy his clothes. It doesn't fit at all. This is not
Oh,
a
my
fashion
goodness.
statement.
Yeah.
This is a man in desperate need. Actually,
Camille,
seeing
that
him
is
may
the-
change my view of the whole thing.
Hard
What a-
disagree. Hard disagree.
Yeah.
America
He
wins
might be
again.
special. Unclear.
The midriff
But let me get you.
intifada.
So Johanna.
Oh,
this-
Look at those eyebrows. Wow.
yeah, yeah.
Unbelievable.
Show me the country where that dude gets to do this.
Wow.
That
Yeah.
country
Right.
ain't Gaza.
No,
I
he's-
did hear that
thrown off a
Iran
roof,
is offering scholarships to students who find
They are.
themselves expelled. I'm sure that they would welcome him with
That would be
open
awesome.
arms.
Yes, they
That's
would.
right.
Open,
I'm sure.
They
open
would.
arms.
Those
One
arms
of
would,
the-
would,
yeah.
would
cinch
wrap
around
right
him in a
around
very
him, and
tight
off
embrace.
the building he'd go.
No.
Megan, one of the reasons why that they asked for zip ties in UCLA, I don't know if you saw some of the footage of the students trying to put their plywood back up the other night. They kind of didn't know how to do it. They were
Yes,
using
that's right.
zip ties to try to lash together plywood fortresses. There's not a lot of construction.
These are all like union guys. These are all like they're doing
Sure,
their PhDs.
yeah.
And
Salt
I'll tell
of
you
the
what, I'm going to read you a sentence because Miss Slutsky is, of course, in a PhD program, and this is what we're paying $90,000 a year for this because we need this. This is exactly what we have, particularly when inflation and recessions and stuff.
Student loan
My
forgiveness
goal,
now. Yeah.
and this is about her own PhD dissertation. My goal is to write a prehistory of metabolic rift, Marx's
Yes.
term for the disruption of energy circuits caused by the industrialization under capitalism. So this is,
Right on.
I mean, Miss Slutsky has so many skills, and
Who didn't do that?
It doesn't surprise me that she doesn't know how to get food.
Yeah, no. So listen, so she's so wonderful. I love her introduction as a character in this story. I pray to God above and thank him for taking care of us this way. We don't know who put this together, but my crack producers, Canadian Debbie, found online a parody video that's been produced of Johanna King Slutsky. Even I have not yet seen it. Let's watch it together, shall we?
Basically, we would like to get some pepperoni pizzas, just make sure they are gluten-free, or you know what, just...
Sounds like you just want pizza with no bread. Is that what you're saying?
Just send some pizzas without bread, okay? Oh, and also, no cheese. Many of us are allergic to cheese, and while you're at it, please make sure there is no tomato sauce. It looks like blood, and we don't want to trigger anybody. So just send us some plant-based pepperoni in a box, and if they don't have vegan pepperoni, just send us some pizza boxes with napkins and shit. Just make sure the pizza box is made with recycled cardboard.
And if they don't have any recycled pizza boxes?
If not, just don't send us anything. We'll just go back home to mommy. Thank you.
Almost impossible to parody these people.
It's hard, yeah.
Almost impossible.
Who says AI is dangerous? It's the best thing that ever happened to America.
So I do want to stay on her. She really is a gift, this gal. So we also took a look at her at her story. And by the way, before I move on from the parody, Eve Barlow, who's a journalist on Substack titled Blacklisted, writes the following. Can we please get an airdrop at Columbia University? We need 900 acai bowls, 1,300 Impossible burgers on gluten-free bread with sugar-free vegan ketchup, and 3,000 bottles of pH 9.0 electrolyte water. This is urgent at UNRWA, the UN Emergency Services. Exactly right. So this gal, Johanna, is listed on Columbia's website as an instructor and PhD student, although we tried to click on her bio from the school, and it now says we cannot find the page. So we don't know whether Johanna, it's possible she received a little backlash from that nonsense. She's currently getting her PhD in English and comparative literature. And picking up on what you were saying, Moynihan, her bio on Columbia's website, when it was posted, said her research interests include Romanticism, Transcendentalism, Marxism, science and literature, environmental humanities, eco-criticism, and 18th and 19th century poetics. What? I only understood every other word.
Well, that's fine.
I like that. A pretty decent
I like
workload.
Transcendentalism. I'm an Emerson. I'm from Concord, Massachusetts. I'm an Emerson fan. But
you would like
you
it.
have to say.
Go ahead.
Yes, I love Miss Slutsky. Every, Officer Slutsky, or this Krupke, sorry.
Speaking of lotion.
Yeah. But the incredible thing about this is that if she hadn't put herself out there, we look at this stuff and we say, oh my God, how much nonsense can you squeeze into one human? And it's like she's just representative of thousands of people on campus. I mean, everybody who is doing a PhD is kind of in that universe. There's a great contest. I don't know if it's still they still do it. It used to be a guy named Dennis Dutton did it, but a bad writing contest of academic papers, and it's just completely incoherent because there are people who believe that they can mask their stupidity with incoherence, and people will think they're just being smart and they don't get it. And that's the kind of stuff when you're trying to read what her PhD dissertation is about. But it's funny because you see her in this situation, and the one thing that we laugh at this stuff because it's ridiculous, absurd, and funny, and it undermines everything they're trying to do. But notice what they are doing. She's trying to pretend that she's a Gazan. We need humanitarian aid. She literally said humanitarian aid. People are going to starve to death. They're going to be thirsty. Insane. I mean, it's like this kind of stuff is like they're cosplaying, and they've never been to Gaza. Obviously, they know nothing about this. They've probably never been to Israel. I don't know. I mean, Miss Slutsky maybe did Aliyah. I did Birthright at some point. Who knows? But this is the thing that happens is you say, we're playing the role of these people. We need humanitarian aid because the Gazans, which by the way, is very, very insulting to Gazans. I mean, whatever you think about this war, and I think we've made very clear, well, I have anyway, of what I think about it on the show. But, the people of Gaza are bearing the brunt of this, and that's because Hamas doesn't give a shit about them. And so I have an enormous amount of sympathy for those people because there are people there that are really opposed to Hamas and have no outlet to actually be opposed to them. And then you have a bunch of spoiled $90,000 a year college students who could just order fucking Grubhub saying that they might starve to death on campus. I mean, it reminds me
How
of
are they supposed to get water, Michael?
The pipes are very old in those buildings, Megyn. That might kill them. They're from 1890.
What am I supposed to do with that thing?
You know what happened during the 50s with the water fountain? It's very triggering. People had separate water fountains. Right. Now you want us to use a water fountain. Okay, Bull Connor.
So listen to this. So she then went on, to speak, and she wanted people to not have her name. All right. She refused to give her name. Of course, we figured it out. But she did want you to know that her pronouns are she, her. Okay. Because like the gentleman with the midriff exposed behind her, she's very pro-LGBTQ and also pro-Hamas. It can happen. And she added the following life lessons, which is, helpful. She's getting her PhD. She must be super smart and elite. Let's take a listen.
Are there any plans to demonstrate at graduation?
It's really bizarre to us and perhaps to members of the public to see so much concern over graduation when we're in the middle of a genocide. I think you have to really look at what's important here. We are on stolen land from indigenous people and the land of people who were displaced from Harlem. We recognize that we have a shared fight. And when we say things like from the river to the sea or open the gates, it's in recognition of the shared fight that unites people at Columbia University, the people in Palestine, and people in Harlem.
I mean, unbelievable.
Fuck you.
If I truly believed I was somehow indirectly a party to some sort of crime, if it was important enough for me to talk about ad nauseum, I would do something about it. I probably wouldn't go to that school. I wouldn't be a partake of that. I wouldn't have the affiliation. I wouldn't pay them my money. I would do something about it. But they never do something about it. These land acknowledgments, this constant berating of everyone about all of the abuses that are somehow had been perpetrated at some point in history, which now need to be accounted for by someone other than me, the person who is literally, apparently a part of the crime. It's just so insanely heinous. And the appropriation of the suffering, one hand, is just kind of ringing in my ear as well. Like the notion of imagining yourselves as the central player in all of this, the actual victim, while you're talking about genocide, is just heinous in the extreme.
And also now it's Harlem's struggle. It's also Harlem's struggle. It's the same.
But
the
notice
Harlem
what
River
she
to
does
the
there.
Atlantic.
From the East River to the Hudson. But notice what she does there in this thing. It's like it is about them, right? We're starving. You have to pay attention to us.
Clearly.
Takes the focus away. But this is the unbelievable, this movement of hypocrisy and double standard. She's standing in front of a bank of microphones saying, "Why are you paying attention to us?"
Yes.
And there's a genocide going. Get away from the fucking microphones. Because you're there. Don't be there. Leave and do a land acknowledgement and give all your money to the local tribe.
No indication who you were.
Happily take
do it.
Everyone ignored
Bernie
you
Sanders,
up until 2 minutes ago.
Yes.
Bernie Sanders yesterday gave a big speech on the Senate floor, and I won't do the Bernie Sanders impersonation because Moynihan's is better, but in which he's like, look, CNN, why are you paying attention to all these college students when you should be paying attention to the people of Gaza and their suffering? And I agree. I mean, I think CNN does pay attention to the people of Gaza and their suffering. But that's a weird thing. That's a weird flex for protesters to be saying, we're here protesting. Why are you paying attention to us protesting here? What are you doing exactly? And then, I mean, also, it's not really getting that much direct attention as much as it probably should. But what are they actually asking for in these places? Always the list is, we need to stop down this university having any exchange with anybody in Israel. That's strange. I mean, that's not really the traditional purpose of a research university, is to close off exchange with an entire country and to make this one country the one. Like, was Saudi Arabia fine? Like, what is the sliding scale? That we're
how about China?
Applying? About Red China, there's a whole bunch of different things, and like to get, we want our endowment funds to not invest in companies that do business with companies in Israel. There's a history of divestment efforts, and whether they work and whether they don't, and usually they don't. Sanctions and targeted sanctions usually don't. The one big exception, both in the sanctions literature and in the student protest divestment literature, is against the UC, University of California, and also Columbia University did this too. They divested from their holdings that had to do with apartheid South Africa in the 1980s. And there's some literature to suggest that stuff worked. Maybe not the university side, but the kind of global revulsion at the apartheid regime, which was righteous. And it had cause, and I think it had some effect, as did the end of the Cold War with the end of the apartheid regime. It's nice. But what the students are asking for in many and most cases seem odd. And if you subjected them like to, I don't know, a simple vote in America, not that you should subject everything to that test, it would be thunderously rejected by people because it sounds crazy. A lot of it also has to do with like we can't have cops anymore, unless of course we're getting targeted by the other side. It's a whole ragbag of kind of leftist dream projects that are not going to come to pass. And there's this weird sense from, you see it from Columbia professors as well, of like trying to overly ennoble these kids, like they're really doing something. I honestly do. I appreciate people who look at the rubble in Gaza and see one side of a civilian population just getting hammered right now as they are, and feeling sympathy for that, and protesting in public about it. I think that's a pretty humanistic impulse, but that's not the only thing that's going on.
You're so right about the cops too, because they get lumped in a lot of these discussions. They want all cops gone. These are big pro-defunder of the police groups. And there was a certain justice to watching the cops go in. This is NYPD body cam video. I'm going to show you the whole thing of breaking down the Columbia encampment in Hamilton Hall. They were professional and they were no nonsense. And unlike the administrators, they were not a bunch of coddlers. There was no police brutality that we've seen in any of these, nor even in any allegation of it. But take a look at the cops going in and reclaiming Hamilton Hall. The students are fighting, trying to. The students are holding up these big wooden shields that they've made. They're not complying. Some are sitting quietly. Some are sitting yelling, "Free Palestine." The cops are trying to disperse them and keep order. They've got barricades up. It's unbelievable that these that these university students think this is fine. We're allowed to do this. We're here to learn. And you just really need to sit back. And any show of police force is offensive to me on this stolen land, you colonizers. I mean, how did they get this way? I know we all cover this. But these kids are what, 22? How the hell is this what would have happened to my kids had I let them stay in the New York City schools? How do you get this demented?
No. I mean, how you get this demented is, evidenced by the number of Columbia professors that are standing beside them and is sending letters to the administration saying you have to let these kids break the law. The amazing thing is that, the disconnect that these kids have from all of this stuff, the hypocrisy. I mean, we talk about Queers for Palestine and gay people saying, I support the Houthis and what they're doing in the Middle East, et cetera, when the Houthis just sentenced, I think, 8 or 9 men to stoning to death for crimes of homosexuality. But they're also, you see this in the police camera videos. The New York Police Department is a majority minority police force. It is over 50% minority. Funny to say over 50% minority, but that's where we are in America. Majority minority police force. They're working class. They do not make a ton of money. They put themselves in danger every day. And, these are the kids that are coddled, $90,000 a year, worried about getting their meal plan. And they're talking about marks. I mean, this has always been a thing that has been funny to look at. I mean, there was a famous joke about the 68 convention of the student getting on his knees and saying, "Long live the dictatorship of the proletariat," and the police officer cracking him on the head with his baton and saying, "I am the proletariat." Mm-hmm. There is something to that, because if you see these spoiled kids, that is the juxtaposition that most people see. They see cops who have a really tough job. And you know what? You don't get a special dispensation when you're breaking the law because you have politics that you think are right. There's no carve-outs in the law that if there is a quote unquote genocide happening, which there is not, this is okay. You can trash a building. It's not even sitting in the building. You're breaking the windows. There were January 6th vibes when you saw those kids with the hammers breaking the glass. For what reason? I don't know. But I suppose they were trying to show a message about their strength, but they look stupid, hypocritical, and weak. And the guys who are actually earning their living and going out there and actually doing their job, they're waiting desperately for one of them to get mad, which you would kind of understand because these guys have tough jobs and these spoiled little brats are making them even harder. They should be up doing real crimes. And maybe one of them will flip him over in his back in a moment of anger. And then now we get that video. And then we have 3 days of media coverage about it. It's a tough job for them. And these kids are spoiled brats and they should all be ashamed of themselves. And most of them should be kicked out of school.
The cops are going in there. They know these kids have called for zip ties and strobe lights and gas masks. Then they walk in. It's complete disarray. They've barricaded the doors and they've got large wooden shields that a lot of them had, not to mention all those helmets we saw. What are the cops like? They behave perfectly appropriately, but this is just to show you, this isn't about protest as part of an American tradition and we protect free speech, whether it's on campus or This is not that. Just stop it. This is nonsense. These are spoiled, entitled brats, and they got what was coming to them. My only question is whether DA Alvin Bragg will actually follow through with any sort of a prosecution. But okay, I want to just go back to this one point because we've touched on it a couple times, but it bears underscoring what these people actually are supporting, right? You mentioned what the Houthis do. You don't have to go that far, of course. You just go to Palestine. You just go and figure out how does Hamas feel, how do the Palestinians feel about homosexuals, all right? Because again, this woman, she, her, surrounded by man in the midriff with his belly button hanging out, they may not know that it's not just Hamas, okay? Because according to Pew Research, 93% of the Palestinian population is completely opposed to homosexuality. That's among the highest in the world. According to Palestinian law, being gay is punishable by up to 10 years in prison. In Gaza, it's punishable by a bullet in your brain. You get killed if you're gay in Gaza, okay? And it's also been named by Forbes as one of the worst countries in the world for LGBTQ travelers. So don't travel to Palestine, Mr. Midriff or Miss She, Her. And just to further underscore it, we cut this soundbite via memory in 2022. This is a Palestinian Islamic scholar, Sheikh Yusuf Abu Islam, on what should happen to gays in Palestine. Watch.
Allah punished male and female adulterers only with flogging or stoning. But when he decided to punish homosexuals, he said that they should be thrown head first from the rooftop of the tallest building, and then they should be stoned from the top.
Free, free Palestine. Here's my belly button in my rainbow colored outfit. I mean, are they just clueless? Like, truly, why are the gays protesting in favor of Palestine? Legit. I don't know whether this man's gay. He looks gay to me. But why?
It's hot. I think it's a useful exercise to try to steel man as much as possible, in between also making hilarious fun out of everybody, which is to say that I think that people work backwards from power. They're in America, so they are, as Michael said earlier, they are interested in the exercise of American power and American sins and American colonialism and settler whatever isms that America has in its past. They perceive that in this fight, they're kind of not wrong about this, that Israel has power and people in Gaza have much less power. And so all other considerations can be subsumed under that. They rank lower in the hierarchy of needs of things that they need to get mad about. So they see Israel as backed by the U.S., and the U.S. is basically enabling genocide on their watch, and they feel really bad about it. And so they're kind of going to look the other way about the sources and methods. Maybe they will occasionally try to fact check the number of rapes and was it really a rape and whatever. But for the most part, they're focused on the exercise of power of these two countries, and they are monomaniacally kind of focused on this. And there's a whole school of thought at Columbia, within the State Department, among younger people and Democrats in particular, that this this sort of connection. The U.S. supporting Israel and Israel's policies are what is the problem with the global affairs and American foreign policy writ large.
No, but
and so that's what they're paying
think in the same way people vote in their own best interest when it comes to presidential elections here in the States, why wouldn't you be saying, I'm not so in favor of the throwing the gays off the rooftops? Like, it has to be sheer ignorance. You know what they need to do? They need to read Reason Magazine, where Matt Welch publishes. In 2016, according to Reason from October of 23, Hamas militants executed one of their own commanders, very beloved guy, for allegedly having sex with another man. Not even his loyalty could save him. They executed him with 3 bullets to the chest, reportedly tortured him first by whipping him, hanging him from a ceiling for hours, and cranking loud music into his cell in order to deprive him of sleep. In 2022, in the West Bank, 25-year-old Ahmed Abu Maria's severed head was found on the west side of the road after he was murdered for being gay. The killer, just in case you were wondering if I'm BSing you, or Reason is, videotaped the execution and shared it on social media. Let that marinate while we take a quick break, and so much more with the fifth column on the other side of this. Do you owe back taxes? Pandemic relief is now over. Along with hiring thousands of new agents and field officers, the IRS has kicked off 2024 by sending over 5 million pay-up letters to those who have unfiled tax returns or balances owed. Don't waive your rights and speak with them on your own. Tax Network USA, a trusted tax relief firm, can help you. They've saved over $1 billion in back taxes for their clients, and they can help you secure the best deal possible. Whether you owe $10,000 or $10 million, they can help you. Whether it's business or personal taxes, even if you have the means to pay, or if you're on a fixed income, they can help finally resolve your tax burdens once and for all. Call 1-800-245-6000 for a private, free consultation, or just visit tnusa.com/Megyn. All right, so let's spend a minute on who may be infiltrating these protests. And we know that the George Soroses of the world are helping fund them and spread them and get tents and so on to these kids on these campuses across America. But there is a question of what kind of element has infiltrated them and why. The report I just mentioned about the wife of a terrorist at Columbia has been out there for a couple of days now. There was this guy, our audience may remember him. His name is Sami Al-Arian, and he went on Fox News like right after 9/11. You guys remember this?
Yeah,
Bill O'Reilly.
It was right, exactly, with Bill O'Reilly in 2001, right after 9/11. And O'Reilly, we tried to find a clip, but we couldn't find one because I don't know why. We continue to look, but O'Reilly got in his grill and really said, you should be in custody, and something like that. Anyway, ultimately he was charged by then Attorney General John Ashcroft, indicted on terrorism charges, and wound up pleading guilty on a charge of conspiracy to make or receive contributions of funds, goods, or services to or for the benefit of the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. He was deported from the United States. So why was his wife, Nala, seen at the Columbia encampment, at least according to reports? This guy, by the way, Sami Al-Arian, was a former professor at the University of South Florida and an activist. And so there's a real question about why this man, this terrorist who was deported from the United States, his wife at least, was seen at the Columbia encampment. That's disturbing enough. And then we get a report today of, okay, this is on X, and it's a, quote, safety alert. All right, the user reports as following: encampments being eyed by Hamas for use as terror hubs. This is unconfirmed by us, but this person is quoting from the documents themselves that she's posted. Today, the Hamas-run resistance movement issued a PDF, quote, flood the gates, escalate, end quote. With directives to over 100 U.S. college encampments, they have mapped out in an interactive website, which she posts, and you can click on if you go to it. These foreign accounts previously published atrocities on 10/7 as victories and daily attacks around Gaza against Israelis by their, quote, comrades in Hamas and Hezbollah. So the posters are very sympathetic and pro-Hamas. For 2 weeks, they published daily updates of U.S. student encampments. Today, in their PDF, they're distributing it to encampment leaders through Palestinian organizers and charities, which they quote in a post as asking for escalation trainings. And screenshots from the PDF include quotes as follows: break open university gates. Quote, your first task is to open campus to the community and reject the distinction between students and outside agitators. Second, above all else, escalate. Power won't move unless we strike fear in the heart of the ruling class and pose a threat to their reproduction of capital. 3, build more militancy. Diversity of tactics only works if we are building more militancy. It's time for more of us to step up to the front line. 4, bring the war home. Image of the Atlanta police and the Israeli Defense Forces. Additional quotes, we will not disavow any actions taken to escalate, including militant direct actions. We keep us safe by escalating. Don't hesitate to take more risk. The pro-Palestinian movement must be a movement against the police. We must no longer cry foul at the bullying of the pigs and stop appealing to respectability of monsters. There exists a dialectical relationship between the underground and above ground. We in the U.S. are not exempt from resistance. It is insincere to glorify the Palestinian resistance if we do not raise our own resistance here. And on it goes. Finally, we are not naive enough to think revolution will come through peaceful means. Again, just on the background, this is a person who has been following these accounts. She goes by Stephanie, at Stephanie Vox online. And she is not purporting to be, the AP or Reuters. She's just somebody who monitors the accounts and has posted them for you to click on and interact with yourself. And I had my team go and try to make sure this wasn't some hoax. This wasn't somebody just trying to make them look more dangerous than they are. And as far as we can tell, this is actually a group that's done the things that she is suggesting they've done. This all leads me to Joe Biden's current push to bring so-called refugees from Gaza here to America. This was unveiled the other day. According to CBS News, they've seen internal federal documents that indicate the Biden administration is considering bringing some Palestinians to the United States as, quote, refugees. Documents show senior officials across several federal U.S. agencies discussing the practicality of different options to resettle Palestinians from Gaza who have immediate family members who are American citizens or permanent residents. All of this, everything I just listed, right? The terrorist wife reportedly at Columbia, we have to escalate, confront the cops. You don't have to stay lawful. And then more of an influx of people from Palestine mean Joe Biden's going to lose the election. Honestly, if he brings Palestinian, quote, refugees into America in the face of all this, Trump could win in a Reagan-esque landslide. I don't think he can do this as a practical matter. And I actually have real concerns already about who's infiltrating the protests because they're all over it. Now, we talk about the biggest universities, but these are happening from campus to campus across America right now. We have another month at least of this before the colleges go, away for the summer. And I, for one, am legit concerned about who may be exploiting all of this and what's about to happen. What's the next shoe to fall?
For me, it's less about worrying about terrorists' wives and who may be trying to exploit it. I mean, we spent the first half of this show looking at people calling for humanitarian aid drops of bottled water to their LARPing little demonstrations in Colombia. I don't think that you see at these demonstrations hardcore organized terrorists. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a lot of people trying, that there's some elements out there trying. But I've also have had material worry since 9/11 about that word actually material, right? A lot of people have been prosecuted for providing quote unquote material support for terrorist organizations. Sometimes that includes lawyers. Dirtbag lawyers, absolutely dirtbag lawyers in particular. But that's not terrorism. And I think that you have to be able to separate out those threats and have a little bit of confidence. Another thing to have confidence in, or not confidence, but to be aware of, let's say, is that FBI is all over this stuff. Counterterrorism, it lives in New York City in particular, but in general, the FBI spends a lot of time infiltrating those types of groups and actually hatching plots that maybe people aren't really all that into anyways. There's been a lot of entrapment with a kidnapping case with Gretchen Whitmer. So I am more confident than you are, Megyn. I don't think that there is a big revolutionary fervor. You can try to do intifada in America, and I wouldn't be surprised if there is some at least one act of attempted terrorism that we'll see before the election, partly because of what we talked about before. We have been getting more political violence in this country, and we have not talked through it sensibly. We've been having this mismatch of an idea that words are violence, but violence are somehow speech. It's like, what are you even talking about? That doesn't make any sense. If we focus on the actual violence as opposed to the incendiary rhetoric, and we focus on actual planning instead of PDF files that may or may not have a lot of direct influence on what's happening on the campuses, I have some faith that we will be okay. I think there will be big attempts to disrupt the Chicago Democratic Convention, and also all of those attempts will have to take place 5 miles from the actual convention, because we've all covered conventions in the past, and they basically create a militarized perimeter around the thing. So yes,
I hope they cross right into the south side of Chicago. See how that goes.
I mean, some will emanate from there. I wouldn't be surprised.
Seriously, I've been there and I've interviewed folks there, and it is to the point where one gang controls one neighborhood and another opposing gang controls the very next neighboring block, and you're not allowed to cross over. Try doing it as an Upper West Side white liberal lady wearing a keffiyeh. I'll look forward to watching that. Good luck, sister.
I have to say that, and this is the kind of the bit where you have 3 essential civil libertarians on talking about this stuff. But, I don't worry about terrorism developing in those camps. I mean, the exploitation of it is exactly what they want, and it's the best thing for them to do. I mean, and by them, I mean that coalition of psychopaths that support Hamas. And we've seen this, and you can go out and look at this, and there's a lot of this stuff out there, particularly at Memory, who you quoted earlier, the Middle East Media Research Institute. They translate stuff. And, Iranian leaders, Palestinian leaders from the PA and Hamas and the West Bank and Gaza, across the region saying, keep it up, students. We're, and it, that buoys them. And that's the best they can hope for, right? Is that people who are in the process of negotiating in Egypt with Israel about hostage releases, seeing this stuff and getting the impression that the entire world is on their side. And they don't really have to give an inch, because the world is turning against Israel the longer they wait. And that is the best thing for them. I mean, I don't worry about the terrorist infiltration or whatever. I don't think that's going to happen. I think that there are extremism is what I have to worry about, and just a sort of broad ideological way is that the center has shifted so much. That Overton window has moved. You have a thing like there's a group called People's Forum that is, in some small way, funded by one of the philanthropy arms of Goldman Sachs, I think. And they're very, very, very radical. You can go on their website and find, I'm not joking about this, I recommend people do it, find lecturers that are pro-North Korea. That's how far extreme left these people are. You saw that with Ramsey Clark's organization, International Answer. They are pro-North Korea too. They plan a lot of these protests. You see those yellow and black signs. It's always International Answer. So I don't worry about terrorism. I worry about the fact that you have these young, impressionable, dopey kids who have left mom in Indiana and now in the big city, from being the smartest kid in their class to now being, this is what the radical kids in my campus think. And that has shifted so much that you see people talking about this stuff and not even blinking. And one final thing, we were talking about anti-Semitism before, and about which part of this stuff is anti-Semitic. It's hard to disentangle a lot of that stuff. I don't think most of it is. But these are kids that have been radicalized in a way that they are literally standing beside anti-Semitic organizations in which the charter of the organization, Hamas in this case, is eliminationist in their anti-Semitism. It is spelled out in their charter that is the destruction of Israel and the death of all the people in that region would not be a problem for them. As Golda Meir famously said, if Israel put down its weapons tomorrow, we'd have peace. I mean, if Palestinians put down their weapons tomorrow, we'd have peace. If Israel did, we'd have genocide. That's the people they're sidling up next to. And I think that's the biggest worry.
Yeah.
Here
I mean,
is,
these
Camille, here
demonstrators.
is just a video I just want to show you of, it is cosplaying for sure, but to your point of like, now they're embracing these people who do not want peace at all and who committed a slaughter just a couple of months ago of all these students, these anti-Israel protesters at UCLA, getting down on their hands and knees and engaging in the Muslim prayer. Okay, I mean, these are the same people who want the 10 Commandments torn down from any building in the United States, but it's fine to go, okay, look at them, look at this. Guarantee you 98% of these people are not Muslim. They don't know the first thing about Islam, but over and over they go down on their hands and knees. We've seen this at the other universities too. I think we saw the similar video out of Columbia. So I guess now 5 times a day they're going to get on their prayer mats and say the Muslim prayer to Allah, the same Allah that we're told would throw them off the building if they're gay. I mean, the cluelessness is jarring, but for me, having lived through 9/11, and I know you guys did too, it's just like, great, Islam coming soon to a theater near you. What could possibly go wrong?
Yeah, I mean, clearly, these kids imagine that they are doing something and it's an act of solidarity with people who are suffering someplace. But because, for reasons we were highlighting earlier, they have a very difficult time disentangling their own narcissism from some imagined form of compassion, like they're going to make a lot of mistakes. And one would have hoped that once you saw people starting to self-immolate in protest of what's happening in the Middle East right now, that might have created a moment of pause on the part of people who are agitating for a ceasefire, who are agitating against essentially Israel, who talk about, Zionism being uniquely dangerous and genocide, et cetera, that they might have thought to themselves, maybe what we should do is try to kind of professionalize our protest movement. Maybe we shouldn't turn the campus into a mosh pit and destroy these buildings that we're supposed to be taking classes in. Maybe if we're going to form a human chain, we try to do it in the most orderly way imaginable. We take a page out of the book of the civil rights demonstrators who famously and bravely and heroically marched despite the fact that they were being sprayed down with fire hoses and having rocks thrown at them and all sorts of other horrific things, dogs trained on them. You take a page out of those people's book, and it becomes much harder for someone to infiltrate your protest movement and use it for nefarious purposes. It becomes much harder for us to see circumstances where we're having a difficult time disentangling people who perhaps have a genuine and completely legitimate concern about humanitarian suffering. And we don't have a difficult time differentiating between them and people who are actual genocidal anti-Semitic maniacs. And I think that it is well and good for us to be concerned in general about terrorist infiltration and to pay very serious attention to any signs that we see that might be going on. But it would be well and good for these protesters to take up the mantle and be a little bit concerned about this as well for their own purposes. To the extent you actually want peace, then trying to tamp down some of the hysteria around these issues is in your interest and in everyone's interest. But if what you're concerned primarily about is how you look and whether or not people are paying attention to you, then being as insane and reactionary and extremist as possible is precisely what you continue to do. And for far too many of these people seem to be concerned primarily about that.
President Trump was out there yesterday. There was no trial in session for him. He has Wednesdays off. Right. And he got out there and made a comment about this. Let's bring the Palestinians here to America. That'd be a great idea. I mean, like Egypt won't take them. Jordan won't take them, but we should take them. We should take them because I guess we have a whole lot more in common with the Palestinians than the Egyptians or the Jordanians do. I'm telling you, if President Biden brings a bunch of Palestinian, quote, refugees into America, he will lose in a landslide. That will happen. Here's President Trump remarking on it yesterday.
In addition to the millions and millions of people invading our country from the border, Crooked Joe is now reportedly planning, this is wonderful news for you people in Wisconsin, to bring massive numbers of Gazans from the Middle East, all live to your American towns and villages. Your towns and villages will now be accepting people from Gaza. Joe Biden seems he's just determined to create the conditions for an October 7th style attack right here in America. It's going to happen.
Jeez.
He had to laugh. He had to laugh while doing it because it's such an absurd proposal given the state of the world right now and such a huge gift to Donald Trump in this campaign.
It is. I mean, I think that last bit there that there's going to be an October 7th in America is ludicrous for a variety of reasons. I mean, particularly if there's going to have refugees that come and establish a Hamas camp and then, I don't know, cross the border.
Well, I mean, look at what's happening on the southern border. Like there is a real worry about who's coming in.
So this is the thing about this, is that I don't think it's going to happen. And I'd be happily come on the show again after the election and take my lashes if it does. But I mean, the difficulty of actually making that happen, vetting people, the process of making it happen, it seems that everything that happens from the Biden administration is this calibration of how much can I give to the people in Michigan and the left wing of my party that I don't want them to break off or vote for, somebody. I mean, they're not going to vote for Bobby Kennedy, who's very pro-Israel, but, I need to keep that coalition together. So it's these little things. I mean, so I was surprised when he said the administration said the other day that words like intifada was a pretty strong statement, actually, about using the word intifada. But there is this line, and I don't believe that that is a proposal that is probably realistic because, Megyn, I don't think that they're that dumb. They understand that with the current border situation, just optics are very bad on that.
I wonder whether we're going to get a statement from GLAAD.
My guess is just that that's a sop to.
You think GLAAD's going to weigh in on that? Yeah, bring them over. 93% are against homosexuality, and you go to jail for a decade. And if you're from a certain part of Palestine, they believe it's okay to stone you to death or throw you off the building if you're gay. Why GLAAD's too busy making statements about people like me because my view on actual biological sex to stand up for gays and lesbians who are, the new refugees are going to move into the apartment building next to Lambda Legal or what? Fine, I'm sure we're going to have a great time at the neighborhood block party. Just make sure we keep it on the sidewalk. I want to show you what's happening at George Washington University, where Shannon Bream tweeted this out. Look what they've done to the founder of our country, founder and father of our country, this statue. This is George Washington, a statue of George Washington in a Palestinian flag as a cape with one of those keffiyehs around his head. You can't see any part of his face, maybe just like a slit where the eyes would be. And he's wrapped from head to toe. He's wearing some sort of a vest with a bunch of, looks like pro-Gazan. Well, no, it's his actual vest in iron, I guess the material is, with stickers all over it that are pro-Palestinian, pro-Gazan. This is a disgrace. They've defiled yet again a leader of our country and has nothing to do with slaves, etc. We saw this post George Floyd. Now it's just what? I don't know. Colonialism again. And we let it. One of the things I love about Lawrence Fox, he's a British commentator. He's over there in the UK. He makes it his mission to go around to all these statues and take this shit down. Where's our guy? We need more of those fraternity guys that we saw at the UNC Chapel Hill who got up there and put the Stars and Stripes back up the other day, right?
And
those guys.
They're going to have a $230,000 rager thrown in.
Yeah, exactly.
It's amazing.
A lot of cocaine.
It's over that now. I think it's like $340,000 now. And by the way, for those
I honestly have to acknowledge the silver lining here, though. It's nice to see that some of these statues are still standing. I didn't know that we had any more.
We didn't look on the bright
George
take
Washington
the flag
statues
off
of the United States. So that's a positive development, maybe.
It is going to. I should point out that 40% of those kids are going to die of alcohol poisoning in the next 2 weeks. So we appreciate your service, and I will be there for your funerals. And that these are the people that clearly would say, George Washington, the slaveholder, which you can't mention George Washington without mentioning that in the next breath. And these are people who are clearly not calling for the release of hostages. And I find that
they hate George Washington so much. Why did they go to GW University? Yeah. Pick another university.
I think
Palestine U online.
Yeah. It was to rename it at some point.
Megyn, as someone from a country where I imagine lots of people actually have retrograde beliefs, at least my ancestry is bound up with Jamaica. And I'm glad that GLAAD isn't agitating against the prospect of bringing, more horrible West Indian people to the United States.
That's what I'm doing.
In the same sense, I don't think they ought to be harassing you for talking about, say, biological sex, for example. But I do think you're underscoring something really profoundly important, like the actual refugee crisis in Gaza and the circumstances there with respect to the regional dynamics, the fact that no one in the region, these various Muslim countries or predominantly Muslim countries, where there is a great deal of agitation on behalf of the Palestinians with respect to their cause and against Israel, that they're not interested in taking people from this particular area.
Even temporarily during a war.
That is profoundly distressing. And it is certainly a severe hardship for the people of Gaza. And I mean, honestly, like they are in fact victims in many, many respects. I mean, Hamas is not a legitimate government by any stretch of the imagination. They are a criminal organization who happen to pretend to be a government from time to time and who are victimizing the citizens of Gaza. You know, whatever the Israeli policy happens to be, that is an unadulterated fact. And it is a fact that is elided frequently by people who are agitating against Israel, who are, crying about their desire to see a ceasefire. I'm interested in a ceasefire. It's also the case that we would have a ceasefire tomorrow if Hamas were to release the prisoners. And we do know that there is some ongoing negotiations.
They won't agree to it. They won't even agree to a ceasefire. They don't want a ceasefire.
It's so obvious.
Yeah, I'm sick of that whole discussion about them and the ceasefire. Like, whatever. We know you don't want it. I feel strongly if we were in Israel's position, we'd be doing exactly what they'd be doing. We would be annihilating them so they couldn't unleash another 10-7. And every civilian death is on Hamas's hands. The blood of those civilians is on Hamas's hands. I'm sorry, but that's just the way I see it. But wait, I do want to spend a moment on these guys at UNC Chapel Hill. So it turns out they're from Pi Kappa Phi. They are the guys who hoisted the Stars and Stripes back up after the Palestinian protesters hoisted the Palestinian flag. Somebody started a GoFundMe. It's now, as of 8 a.m., it's probably higher now. It was at $340,000 to throw them a rager. It's at $421,000 now to throw them a rager. And here is the pitch whoever started this GoFundMe made to get all these donations. I'm going to read it. Commie losers across the country have invaded college campuses to make dumb demands of weak university administrators. But amidst the chaos, the screaming, the anti-Semitism, the hatred of faith and flag, stood a platoon of American heroes, armored in vineyard vines in Patagonia, fueled by Zin and White Claws. These triumphant Bohemians protected Old Glory from the unwashed Marxist horde, laughing at their shrieks and wails and shielding the Stars and Stripes from Soviet missiles. These men of the UNC Chapel Hill Pi Kappa Phi gave the best to America, and now they deserve the best. Help us raise funds to throw this frat the party they deserve, a party worthy of the boat-shoed proletariat who did their country proud. You guys couldn't have written better yourselves.
Oh my gosh.
Is that the Free Beacon did that one?
Yeah, that's I love that they're making fun of them in like a gentle, fun way, and then also supporting. Was that a serious? Was that something just joking?
Yes.
That America was like, fuck yeah, these guys are amazing.
I'd only have one correction to that statement though. Not Zin, Lucy. Shout out to my homeboy Coogan. Lucy is a superior product, and that's what you should be buying if you're going to be
choosing. What is a Lucy? Wow. I don't even know what that is.
Lucy is a product. Yeah, it is a product.
Is it like a White Claw?
No. So Zin is a chewable tobacco. It's like these patches. So these pouches. So if you're going to use something, you should use Lucy, which is.
Are you getting paid for this?
Yeah, he is.
No, Coogan is a friend.
Oh my god!
I mean, I'm sure he'll slide me a little money for plugging his product.
If you're from New York, a Lucy is when you go to a bodega and you buy a single cigarette.
Yeah. No, I mean LUCY, not a Lucy.
Okay. Yeah, that's what a Lucy is.
One of the.
Hold on, there's another update now. In our story. Let's see. The GoFundMe, stand by. Okay, the update. A programming note for all of you who bleed red, white, and blue. We have identified a world-class event planner named Susan, and she is already hard at work. She worked in the White House and knows what she's about. Another fine American is wheels down in North Carolina tonight and working to identify all of our noble-born brochachos who stood down the frumpy hordes with nothing more than a pastel shirt and smile. GoFundMe has dispatched a member of their team to work closely with us and ensure your donations do as God intended, to show these guys enough fireworks to blow their Oakley aviators straight off their faces. This is unbelievable. Who's behind this? At this point, they're going to get on a yacht for a month. I mean, the numbers are getting rather large. That's
this whole podcast today is just like makes me want to break out into USA chants from the midriff intifada on down. Like, it's only in America, people. This is what we do.
It gives you hope. It just gives you hope. I love seeing those guys put the Stars and Stripes back up. I really do want to stick them on the George Washington statue. We should dispatch them to all the college campuses in their vineyards.
They don't have money for it. Yeah.
And
AmeriCorps.
And Megyn, to your fear about shithole countries, one of those guys, I think, is the child of Venezuelan immigrants, right? He came from a shitty socialist country, and he came here and he said, look, we immigrated here. This is a great country. People from my family, and this always happens to first-generation immigrants, are in the military, and they defend the flag and take it seriously, and so do I. That's what happens when immigrants come here more often than not. I mean, one of the Palestinian refugee that came to this country was Justin Amash's, I think, father. Both his father and mother are refugees. One came from Palestine and one came elsewhere, Palestinian Christians. I'm glad that we have Justin Amash in this country. Great American. Hope he wins the Senate primary.
There's so much promotion going on today.
Well, I mean, honestly, you just hit on something though, Welch. Like a refugee program wherein we're swapping protesters, American-born protesters who are majoring in some sort of weird Marxist program for Gazans. Like, we send them over and we get one Gazan in
exchange program.
In fact, I think just because of the quality of these people, we should probably send 4 of them over for every one Gazan. And that is a program I think a lot of Americans could get behind. If the Biden administration were to take that on, I think that might actually be a win for them.
They would have to all meet on the tarmac, Camille, and the Gazans would be like, what? I don't know what you're doing, you crazy, stupid
Has to be a completely voluntary program, though. I want to be clear.
The Gazans are definitely from Russia. I don't know how they got there.
100%. Yeah, they're Ukrainian.
Can you see Hamas like switching places with these students and going up into Hamilton Hall and being like, there's no lotion. Where's the lotion? I took it off.
Where is the ladder to the roof? We need to throw some people off.
A lot of those people would have an instant conversion. I mean, they would get here and say, you know what?
This is
America? Great. Death to America.
What is wrong with you people?
It is awesome here.
We decided
so much
to lean
lotion.
Instead of sending you home with the cops, we decided to lean in. I'd like you to meet Ahmad. And 10 of his buddies. Just they're going to spend the night with you. We'll see you in the morning. Maybe. We'll find out. All right. Stand by. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back and we will switch to some other topics because there's more goodness coming your way. More with the Fifth Column straight ahead. Do you ever find yourself craving the culinary delights of your favorite local restaurant, but time and energy constraints make it seem out of reach? Or maybe you resort to fast food or pantry meals to save time and money. If so, you're not alone. Exploring the local food scene can be costly and time-consuming. But what if I told you there's a solution? I want to tell you about Cook Unity, the first chef-to-you service delivering locally sourced meals from award-winning chefs every week. And it's more affordable than other delivery options. Visit cookunity.com/MK or enter code MK before checkout for 50% off your first week. With Cook Unity, you can enjoy a chef-quality dining experience right at home without the hassle of cooking. Unlike other meal services, Cook Unity is a chef collective bringing exciting culinary talent straight to your table. Experience chef-quality meals delivered right to your door. Go to cookunity.com/MK or enter code MK before checkout for 50% off your first week. That's 50% off your first week by using code MK or going to cookunity.com/MK. Can your savings weather an economic storm? Think about what you've put away for the future. Inflation can render cash worthless. Real estate can crash like it did in 2008. Economies built on a mountain of debt can fall like a house of cards. There are very few physical assets that you can invest in that can stand the test of time. But gold has withstood as a valued form of money. It's why many people are flocking to it right now, and it's why Birch Gold is busier than ever. Through a little-known tax loophole, Birch Gold lets you convert a retirement account into a tax-sheltered IRA in physical gold. And the best part, it does not cost you 1 cent out of pocket. To learn more, text MK to 989898 and claim your free info kit on gold. Again, can your IRA or 401k weather an economic storm? If not, consider looking into Birch Gold. Text MK to 989898 and explore securing your savings today. Update for you from the Donald Trump trial, where they are now cross-examining the lawyer for Stormy Daniels and for Karen McDougal, the playmate with whom Trump allegedly had an affair, both of whom allegedly tried to get money from him so as not to disclose this. Their lawyer is named Keith Davidson. He came right before Avenatti for Stormy. And what the defense lawyer, this guy Emil Bove, is trying to do with Mr. Davidson now, because it's time for cross-examination, this guy on direct talked about how he dealt with Michael Cohen. They struck a deal. He wanted money, in particular for Karen McDougal, $150,000, so she wouldn't go public with the story, and the National Enquirer paid it. Now it's cross-examination time, and Trump's lawyer is making him look like an absolute scumbag. That appears to be the cross-examination approach, strategy. This from the New York Times. He establishes Davidson has never met Trump. Mr. Bove continues to try to create distance between these deals and Donald Trump. Trump's defense is, in part, I don't know what the hell Michael Cohen was doing. You know, like he was out there, and my people, like they're out there doing what they're going to do. Michael Cohen took out a home equity loan to pay off Stormy Daniels. It wasn't at my hand. Okay. Bove returns to the topic of how Michael Cohen desperately wanted a job in Trump's White House and is bitter that he didn't get it. And that's why Michael Cohen's going to be lying about Trump when he takes a stand. He gets him to testify that he acted despondent, Cohen did, on a call with Keith Davidson when he didn't get the job. Davidson, asked about the call, says, quote, I thought Cohen was going to kill himself. He thought he was going to be the attorney general.
Oh
my God. Oh,
anything's
my
possible.
God. I mean, you know those crazies who say, like, if Trump wins, I'm moving to Canada? Like, if Michael Cohen had become attorney general, I might have considered it. Like, I'd have to at least look at where else we
It'd
could
be
go.
funny, though. The coats. Come on.
I mean, truly, like, okay. Bo is now trying to paint Davidson as a serial extorter, asking for money in various situations and being mindful not to cross the line into actual extortion. Bo is successfully digging up unsavory episodes from Davidson's past to cast him as shady. A former client of his leaked info that Lindsay Lohan was in rehab, extorted Charlie Sheen. This guy, Davidson, has resorted multiple times now to I don't recall. Suggests the money to Stormy Daniels. Oh, Bove, the defense lawyer, increasingly headed toward the suggestion that the money to Stormy may not have been paid to cover up an affair with Daniels at all, but because Trump was being shaken down. In other words, they just wanted to, get his money. Who knows whether they actually had an interlude. The guy says, well, I've had over 1,500 clients in my career. This is, I guess, why he remembers nothing. And they're saying he appears something akin to ashamed, forced to answer questions about other celebrities who his clients purportedly had relations with and from whom they sought money to stay quiet. They're trying to paint him as, this is all this guy does. He sees a celebrity with a deep pocket and he finds a way to extort them for money so that either an actual affair or the allegations of one don't hit the front page of any given tabloid. This sounds very effective in destroying this guy's credibility. What do you guys think?
That certainly sounds like it.
I just want to fast forward to 2030. Like this, there will be a time when we're not talking about this crap, and like our politics will move to a different place. Maybe it'll be worse, but I have fatigue over even knowing Michael Cohen and a universe of where politics is all. I get it; it's entertaining, but like hush money and stuff. And why are we having a trial about this? And why are we insisting that the presidential candidate is as crazy as he is? Has to have his ass in a courtroom seat for a whole big swath of his campaign, or else he'll be in contempt. The whole thing is just it's very dispiriting.
Megyn, every single time we talk about the Trump legal case, I want to sort of turn the tables and start asking you questions. I mean, there are two things that I'm wondering about right now. The first is like Michael Avenatti, who I know has called into MSNBC at least once to do like jailbird legal correspondent via collect call, which is like kind of hilarious and really sad at the same time, because I don't want anybody to be in jail, to be totally honest. Is he going to be called is the first question. The second question is, what is your sensibility about the case now that we're into it a little bit? Are you thinking like the odds of conviction, have they risen? Have they fallen? Is it too early to say?
If this were a fair jury, actually interested in the evidence and were they properly instructed on the law, it would be Trump's easily. He would be acquitted. But I do think, I said this the other day, in the same way Marcia Clark lost the OJ trial once she didn't move the venue and got the jury she got, she lost then. This trial too has already been lost by the fact that it's being tried in Manhattan and they've got the jury they do. I mean, maybe there's somebody on there who will hold out. That could happen. But the overwhelming odds are that didn't happen, that they all have the proper New York City liberal elite credentials, that they can't stand Donald Trump, and that they can't wait to find guilty. And frankly, even if they are fair, they're going to be given legal instructions when they get the jury instructions that are so awful and not consistent with the actual state of the law that there are horses that are being led right to the water and they will drink, but it's wrong. I mean, this judge, it's a long story, but the short of it is the jury instructions should say, if you find that the type of money paid to Stormy Daniels is the type of money that would only ever be used to advance somebody's electoral chances, then you may proceed to finding whether Trump actually paid that money. That's what it should read. And for them to say, do we think that the hush money is only ever paid to advance an election? Oh, wait, no. Men have been paying that since the dawn of time. Okay, so now what should we do, Judge? The next line should say, then acquit. Then acquit. Because there's no underlying crime that would have revived the dead misdemeanor of falsifying business records. But what it's actually going to say is, do you think he conspired to try to win the election with Stormy Daniels or her representatives? And the only way they're going to say no to that is if they really believe he and Michael Cohen didn't talk at all. And I don't think they're going to reach that. So I think he's losing. He shouldn't be, but he is. And I stand by my original prediction that he's going down. He's going to be convicted in this case.
But anyone's guess whether or not there's actual jail time involved here.
There's no way there's getting jail time. I just think that's a left-wing fantasy that, Andrew Weissman spins the little MSNBC viewers into thinking might happen in, the mornings when he's feeling a little lonely. That's what he thinks about. And lotion. And it's not happening. I'm stunned. There's something seriously wrong with this judge if he tries to put Trump in jail over there. I don't think so. Okay, now speaking of horrible things and people,
there's been 8 years of those expectations, by the way.
Okay, speaking of horrible things and people, Kristi Noem was out there trying to defend her dog killing. She gave an interview to Sean Hannity last night. The audience knows the story by now. We did a whole hour on it the other day. And this is how she's trying to spin it. Take a listen.
I guess people, because you shot the dog, is there a difference which way you put a dog down? I'm not really sure, but I don't think people understood it. I want to give you a chance to explain.
Well, Sean, you know how the fake news works. They leave out some or most of the facts of a story. They put the worst spin on it. It was a dog that was extremely dangerous. It had come to us from a family who had found her way too aggressive. We were her second chance, and she the day she was put down was a day that she massacred livestock that were part of our neighbors. She attacked me, and it was a hard decision. And the reason it's in the book is because this book is filled with tough, challenging decisions that I've had to make throughout my life. That most politicians, they will run from the truth. They will shy away and hide from making tough decisions. I don't do either of those.
Okay. It wasn't fake news. It was your book. It was your stupid story that you chose to disclose. We're going off of what you wrote, you dumbass dog killer. Now it's no longer a puppy. Hello, it was 14 months old. There's no getting around how old the dog was. Now she calls it a dog, but it was a puppy. And she says it was massacring the chickens. It was a massacre. It's a dog. It's a dog. It wasn't trained. What did you say? I had to stop the massacre, and it attacked me. It attacked her, she says in the book, when she tried to pull the chicken out of its mouth, like most dogs will do who are, aggressive and untrained when you try to pull something as valuable as a chicken. Dogs like us see chickens as food. So the dog is following its natural instincts. This is a fail, a complete fail. What do you guys think?
I think that is one of the greatest interviews that I've ever seen. Up there with Christine O'Donnell's "I'm Not a Witch." Because when you think about what she's saying, she's like, the fake news. Sometimes as a politician, you have to make tough decisions. I'm like, you shot a dog. Because it's not like, oh my God, Russia has invaded Ukraine. What do we do? It's like, you just shot a dog. And you literally use the word massacre because it ate chickens because it was hungry. It was
a genocide.
That was Genocide Joe, and you have her genocidal dog.
So there are a couple of things about this story that are a bit difficult. I mean, one, she also shot a goat, which from what I understand, because I read the story about this, the book isn't out yet, so I haven't seen it. She shot them on the same day, maybe even buried them
one right after the other,
pit.
assembly line.
That's, I mean,
speaking of massacre,
to think, you killed the dog.
She blindfolded the goat.
I'm already into
Just
it.
kidding. No, she didn't.
Let me kill the goat. No, she didn't blindfold the goat. But the details appear to be that she was shooting the goat and the goat jumped right as she was getting ready to shoot it. So she had to shoot it again. So to actually get it down, which, that's unfortunate. But no one cares about the goat. We only care about
the goat doesn't get enough airtime, Camille.
We occasionally eat goat. But I will say that the other part of this that is challenging, I'm just going to keep it a buck with you. Okay, because I feel like we're in a circle of trust here. If she were harder to look at, it would be easier to condemn her. Yeah. Because killing dogs is bad. But I mean,
Megyn, if you saw our Biff Column
not feeling that one,
you would realize that Camille has a problem, that he is obsessed with her.
And I'm not obsessed.
Yeah,
he loves Chrissy Noem.
Yes, this is not true.
Chrissy Noem is like I could send you a message that it was said she just denied the Holocaust, and you would send back a picture of her but she's pretty attractive.
You could be the next Corey Lewandowski. There could be an opening there for you, Camille.
This is political analysis, pure and simple. I am looking at this the way a voter would, and most voters are going to look at her and say, maybe the dog had it coming. How short was the dog's skirt?
No, they are not.
There are questions that
the voters are against her.
Ask.
Yeah,
red states and blue states.
Cory Bush. I'm just
saying. And now, after the fact, she wants to build the dog into Cujo, but I'm sorry, we read the original account, at least as reprinted by The Guardian, which is quoting from her book, and that's not how she styled it. She said it killed some chickens, and it was distracting her on the hunt. And by the way, she was like, it was aggressive and it was mean. Like you said, and it was really hard for me. She talked in her book about how I hated that dog. I hate it. Yeah. Oh, was it so hard for you? Like, it's not hard at all. Like you said, it was like a serial killing.
The kids came home. The kids came home on the bus and are like, "Hey, where's Pepper or whatever the dog's name? Popcorn."
I shot it in the face like a real leader.
He's dead. Come over here and help me bury it. We're gonna do this before dinner.
I do want to interrupt Camille
tonight.
I wanted to tell you that if a woman was attractive enough, I would shoot a dog for her, but she doesn't qualify. I'm just going to tell you. You're going to be like a Estonian model, and I'll shoot a dog for you.
We had the funniest talk. My mom put our dog Bess down. She was 10. She was a shepherd, and Bess had lost control of her sphincter, and that was the end of Bess. And ever since, we have been we've been calling my mom the Hillside Strangler because the dog, we feel the dog wasn't yet ready to go. And by the way, another dog had been put down, but that dog had bitten 11 people, including our neighbor, in the face. He did a flying leap off of our staircase.
Did your mom do it herself?
So but she brought. I'm just saying there was like a pattern, and we joked like when she married my stepfather, we would warn him like, be careful about the sphincter because next thing you know,
as soon as yours lose it.
I was talking to my mom about how horrible the Christy Noem story was, and my mom was like, well. I'm like, Hillside.
Gotta do what you gotta do. My conspiracy theory, which I'm going to spread throughout the land, is that Christy Noem had a ghostwriter, and his name was J.D. Vance. Because now J.D. Vance is a candidate for vice president, and she is not.
Clever. I like that. I don't care how many interviews she gives on Hannity. Sometimes I love to watch him like try to help the guest, like, I guess there are a number of ways you can put down a dog. Do you think it's the way, we
that dog had praised Adolf Hitler, correct?
It was actually a Nazi.
Do you guys have any thoughts on who Trump's likely VP choice is?
I mean,
silence.
That's a tough one.
I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, have we talked about this on the show? I thought we had.
No,
I don't know. I'm going to be wrong about this. So, and there's probably about 1,000 other things in this episode that I'm going to be wrong about. Like there's going to be a Gaza encampment in the middle of Chicago in 6 months or something. So I will withhold saying the JD Vance.
All right. Well, let me give you 2 choices. I think we can safely rule out Christy. No, JD Vance or Tim Scott.
Yeah.
I don't know. Can we rule out Christine? I mean, the reality is that Donald Trump seems to pick his lawyers from a lookbook. Like, I'm not sure.
She ruined. Trump is too smart to pick her now. He's too smart.
There's other hotties in the world.
Yeah.
There's hotties who don't kill dogs.
Look at Tim Scott.
So who does he think is hotter? Tim Scott. Yeah, Tim Scott. He thinks Tim Scott is
a good-looking man.
I don't know.
I don't think that he's going to need someone who can absolutely look in the cameras and be totally convincing that Trump is not the true Messiah, but he's the leader of American politics. This is the way that we need to go. Tim Scott, when he does that, it's a hostage video. And it makes you feel bad. Like Marco Rubio is apparently on the short list. He's not going to get it. He just likes to humiliate Marco Rubio for sport.
It can't be
like
Rubio.
A cat with a mouse.
He's from Florida.
It's not going to be. There's no chance. So
you should put Mitt Romney on the short list.
JD Vance used to not be a Trump fan, but yeah, he's a great Trump whisperer.
I got to go. You guys are the greatest. Thank you. Go support them at wethefifth.substack.com. Have a great weekend, everybody. We're off tomorrow. We'll see you Monday.